Okay, I'd like to call to order today's special council meeting on budget deliberations. I am just sitting here for the first 15 minutes of the meeting while Mayor Tate is in a session, a meeting, and she'll be upstairs shortly. So, Mr. Schaefer, do you have any introductory comments?
Have we adopted the agenda, Your Worship?
Okay, let's do that. We have some new business supplementary information to consider here, which I think is a new iteration of the plan. Is that correct?
I think it's it wasn't attached initially.
Okay. Don, I see there's new business supplementary information.
And Your Worship, I think that was a notation that's on the agenda as standard practice, just in case anyone has something.
Okay. So we have no new business or supplementary information. So can I have a motion to approve today's agenda? That's Megan, and Tony is seconding. All approve? Okay. Now, to note around the public question and comment period for Ms. Johansson here, Lise Johansson, thank you for being here today, representing the people of Souk. A fractal of 13,001, right there. And you at home, apparently we are live on video today. We will be taking a break at 6 o'clock, approximately, for an hour, and the public, Lise, or anyone else who chooses to show up, is welcome to hang out here, and we'll be back at 7 o'clock to complete the evening. So, on that note, Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the first of our budget sessions for 2019. I wanted to let Council know, just to start with, that staff has been working diligently on this particular budget for about a month, paring down items that might or might not have been on a wish list for members of staff. We have brought only the essential items to Council. There are a number of asks for staff. There are projects that Council has indicated that it would like us to undertake. The start of the official community plan, a strategic planning process, and an organizational review. These are all accounted for in the budget. And we studiously avoided standing up straw men in the budget for Council to swat away. We only wanted to bring Council the items that we felt Council actually needed to consider going forward for the year. So I'll just hand it over to Ms. Gray and let her actually carry us through the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don, Mayor and Council. Just before I get started, I just want to say a quick thank you to our receptionist Cassidy, our financial clerk Chandra and Cassidy, as well as Stacey DeLeep, who's done a tremendous amount of work to help and support me over the last month or so, 6 weeks, to give you guys something to look at today. So just a big thank you to them. I wouldn't have been able to do this without them. So thank you.
And thank you from us to you, Ms. Gray, for stepping up and really putting in some late hours.
Yeah. No, it's all right.
Okay.
It's been an experience.
Yeah.
So as Dawn mentioned, this budget, I worked really hard with the departments to present something that is realistic, that knowing that the OCP, the org reviews, the Parks and Trails master plans, there's a lot of planning going to be happening this year. So this is really a status quo budget with a few things added on because we know we're predicting the results of these plans will say we still need these things. So delaying them for another year is just going to hold everything up this much for that much longer. So the items presented forward are really not the nice to haves. We feel these are kind of important items to start as soon as possible, and so that's kind of just the lead up. We have done a lot of work to pare things down, make things realistic. Because it's new council, it's new to me, I don't know kind of what your questions are, so just kind of preface this. If I don't know the answers to your questions, we've got Jen and Stacey here who will be taking lots of notes, and we'll just come back to you on Monday with the responses to your questions. So this is kind of the first here, put some numbers in front of you, so then we can find out what more information you want about those numbers and go do the research over the next few days and come back on Monday if it's something we don't immediately know the answer to. So, but that being said, I'll just kind of start. Okay. Going through the PowerPoint. So I'm just going to start this with a high-level overview of the budget and kind of where some of these numbers are coming from. And then how it's going to work is basically each department's going to come up and do a mini, some bigger, some smaller, depending on, what they're asking for, a mini presentation on each of their asks and their budget. And so then we can kind of ask questions about each one. So I'm just going to start with a kind of a general overview. If you guys have some questions, we can kind of talk about them. Or, again, it may be something that we can just take notes on and we'll come back to on Monday, depending on where we're going to go, because we weren't really sure. So I didn't. So starting again, so this first slide is just a general overview. I'm not sure why that didn't come through right. Looks right on mine. It's just basically highlighting our total expenditures as shown in the plan are $22 million this year. And it's just highlighting most of them comes from other municipal purposes. In my future slides, I'm getting a little more details on this. This is just a quick snapshot of a pie chart because people like pie charts. Of that $13 million, of that $22 million, $8.6 million specifically for property taxes funds, mostly the operations like the departments, police, fire, parks. Those are the main sources of funding for those operations. So that totals $8.3 million this year. And of course, because we have to balance our budget, the total funding sources are $22 million, and they come from property taxes, as well as grants and other borrowings, sewer. Again, I'll get into more details on these in the future slides. Well, the purple that's why I'm not sure why it's not showing up on there. It's the grants, borrowings, and other. So yeah, I'm not quite sure why it's on my printout, so I'm not sure what happened there. So I'll just start with a highlight on budget changes. So there's 6 positions you'll hear about that we're requesting being added for 2019. These include, and these have all been prorated to estimated start dates for 2019 as well, so we're not just putting a full year of salary in for these positions. We have cut them back to realistically, June would be the earliest one of these positions could start, and some of them are later in the fall, so we have kind of crunched the budget for those as well to keep in mind. The 6 positions are a records management clerk. This has been in the budget for many years. I'm not clear why we've never just pulled the trigger and done this. It's critical to us. It helps us serve residents better. It helps us keep our records organized. Most people are doing this off the side of their desk right now, and it's not a good process. It's a clerk position. It's not a high-level, super high-paying job. So it's, I think, in my opinion, a critical position to help keep the office running in an efficient manner. There's 2 building positions being asked for, the chief building official, as well as a permit/plan coordinator. As I'm sure you're aware, and most people know, the building permit process has been strained for quite a few years. So this area needs some attention. Right now, there's only 3 staff dedicated to it, and it's just the demand far exceeds their resources and their ability. There's only so many hours in the day that they can do their work. So I believe the chief building official, we've posted this job 3 times now under some other description. So we've made some tweaks, changed the qualifications, and are hoping we'll get a different pool of candidates that will apply. We're advertising it broader. We're on more websites than we had in the past to try and hopefully reach more people. So we're really hopeful that position will give us some much needed experience and expertise in the building department. And then the permit plan coordinator is basically like a file manager that helps move the file through the office, deals with the applicants, deals with staff, deals with other questions that come in. So it's a good organizing critical role. And again, that department's been so short-staffed for so long. They've really been kind of running ragged, doing the best they can. But those will fill pretty big needs, if you ask me. The other position is a firefighter, which is a requirement based on the deputy chief position being created this year, so we need to hire another firefighter. There's a wastewater operator being posted currently because I believe there's only 4 positions there right now, and you need at least 2 to run the plant. So there's a lot of overtime being paid. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So It's just, sewer is just a newer thing, so this is just the growth of it and us understanding better the actual needs of this department. And then the final position is for an engineer. This has been asked for many years. I'm not sure, a few years ago we lost the engineer.
Yeah, I think it was 2015 or 16, early 16, perhaps. Yeah.
So that's in there as well, because I think it'll fill a critical need with high-level experience that will help us serve the public in a more efficient manner. Again, the departments will talk a little more specifically about these positions. It's just giving you a snapshot of what we're looking for. A big thing in here this year that hasn't been in here before is official community plans, strategic plans, organizational review, transportation master plan, parks and trails master plans. So because of all these plans is why our budget is fairly bare bones, because these plans could significantly change what our 2020 budget going forward is going to look like. So we didn't want to make hard commitments that will potentially we'll have to renege on or go back on when the outcome of these plans are finalized and priorities are determined. So we definitely fully anticipate either coming back at some point later this year, depending on the timing, or else for the 2020 budget process, we'll include a lot of recommendations that I'm assuming these plans are going to put forward, and council will make their priorities, and then we will be able to help you explain how to make this happen. So those are, bigger ticket items that we hadn't budgeted for. So that results in a 1.6% property tax increase just from funding those alone. And we have prorated those as well. Like the OCP is a big ticket item, but it's been prorated to, realistically, we haven't even tendered it yet. So we're assuming we're going to spend about $50,000 this year once we get it tendered, and because it's a milestone payment thing. So we've prorated that over the 3 years, assuming that's how long it's going to take. By the time we get it part of this year, part of 2021 will kind of be the end of it.
So just for the record, the cost of living increase is actually higher than 1.6. So you've actually brought us a budget that, taking that into account, is less than last year's budget.
Yeah, sure.
Nicely done.
Sure. Well, I'm not sure if that's exactly how it's working, but sure, thank you.
Where you get it.
Yeah, I'll take that. So, and then the strategic plan is in there. It's currently underway, which is why Maya's not here at this moment, just dealing with that. And then as well, an organizational review, which is why, again, we're not asking for a lot. 6 positions may seem like a lot, but it's spread out between multiple departments, and we anticipate the strategic plan will then feed into the organizational review, which will then determine potential future staffing needs. So, again, we feel like even with an organizational review, these positions will be identified as critical needed positions. So those are factored in. We've never had reserves or anything set up to fund these in future years before. So to alleviate this problem from happening again in 2021, you'll see there's a master planning reserve account that we're recommending be created to start funding $40,000 a year to save, so that in 10 years, 5 years, whenever some of these plans come up for renewal, we will have a fund available that we can pull from to fund these in future years, because it didn't currently exist. So right now they're coming out of tax dollars, at least in this version. A big item here is employer health tax, which I'm sure everyone is fully aware of. For District of Sauk, it results in a 1.06 property tax increase. So it's pretty significant for us. So, we normally paid, let's say, $30,000 roughly in MSP premiums. We now have to pay that this year plus $81,000 of employer health tax, because it's every salary dollar is taxable now, versus for employees, not every employee had us paying their premiums. Some of them had their spouse pay them through their employer or whatever, So it's a significant hit for us because we have to pay both this year. 2020, we just have to pay the employer health tax, but it is still an increase over and above what we've ever had to pay before. So that's 1.06 alone of the 7.3 number that you guys have seen. And then as well, another budget change is the road maintenance contract is up for renewal this year. This is our main road contract that does all the road repairs. So that's budgeted. We've gotten some high-level estimates and it's approximately a $94,000 increase over last year's budget that we had in there. So, and that's still an unknown because it hasn't been tendered yet. So it's just a high-level estimate. So that's been factored into the numbers that you see here. And so this is just a quick high summary. Some of these slides have, I guess you guys are all new, but they're similar to slides that are done last year because it's basically the same cost drivers are happening year over year for Sooke because we are a growing community. So the biggest one is population growth. Growth impacts all levels of service. Increase in demand on staff to meet the needs of the residents, and infrastructure needs or demands are increased, and which, combined with historically low taxes, resulted in the district not keeping pace with demand. So, we've got aging infrastructure, low taxes, the perfect storm of there's never enough money being allocated, and reserves haven't been set up properly over the years. So we're kind of playing catch up to be able to serve residents well into the future and have our assets be well maintained. As I mentioned, historically low property taxes. So, from between 2012 was 0%, 2015 was 0%, 2016 0.85%. Like, these are not sustainable property tax increases. I appreciate nobody wants to pay more taxes, but realistically, all of our every service, every cost of ours goes up every year. Hydro goes up, every cost goes up. Like, it's just cost of living. And so not passing any of those on to the residents is makes it more difficult to manage things and grow, and especially in a growing community where needs are far outreaching the money we have available to spend. So, and just again, cost drivers, just more residents equals more calls for service. So there's just more demand on our staff and more needs, more parks to maintain, it's more of everything. Some of the risks that are included here are road maintenance contract. So this is expiring in 2019. As I mentioned, we've got a $94,000 placeholder in here for an estimated increase, but the final amount is unknown at this time. We have to tender this. So
what's the percentage?
For it's like
Be about 1.3%.
in the property tax, sorry, is that what you meant? Yeah, sorry.
Yes, please.
Because, approximately $76,000 equals approximately 1% property tax increase. So just to kind of keep that number in your mind, 76,000 is a 1% property tax increase in expenses. So, another risk is the wastewater DCC. I guess Rob can speak maybe more to this fund. This is decisions need to be made later this year regards to sewer, so I'll kind of just save that for some future slides. It's just a risk that's been known for a while. Is we took out a loan to build the sewer initially. We were going to use wastewater DCC to fund that, but if the funds run out before the loan is paid off. So this is a 2021 issue that will come up. So it's not a 2019 issue, but it definitely needs to be talked about this year so we can make plans and be prepared for how we're going to address this in 2021. A risk is staffing. Community growth and years of understaffing result in difficulties for staff keeping pace with residents' needs. Staff are working a lot of overtime, getting burned out, which results in more sick time. It's basically a vicious cycle. So it's critical that we fill some long-standing vacancies this year to alleviate pressure off the existing staff and just better serve the needs of the residents of Sooke. Another risk is QP contract has expired December 31st of 2018, so we're going to be entering negotiations for that. This budget does include an estimated increase based on the settlements of other municipalities, so that is already included in there, but we don't know what else might come up in that negotiation, but there is a placeholder for an estimated increase included in here. Okay, a couple more risks. Reserves. Reserves have been relied on heavily in prior years, and they're relied on heavily this year to keep the tax rate as low as possible. So there's risk with that because unexpected things come up. We don't have the reserves available to pay for them. So that's always a risk. And you'll see in the 5-year plan, we're not relying as heavily on reserves in the future years, but relying heavier on property taxes. So this will be kind of future conversations. Once we know the results of all the plans and priorities, we can come back with a better, more fulsome conversation about how we want to manage all of this and deal with the reserves. Building, the current building that we're currently in is in need of quite a few repairs. we can manage the staff that we currently are asking for in this building, but anything beyond that, we're really going to be quickly running out of space. And there is significant repairs and upgrades that are required to this building just from a safety code standard. So we are undertaking a building needs assessment this year to confirm, and once complete, a report will be brought forward to council to kind of help us determine next steps of how much money are we going to put into this building versus looking for potentially an alternate location if it comes to that point. So it's just going to be we don't know an answer to this yet. We need to do this assessment first and see some actual numbers, and then we can come back with a better conversation of what decisions do we want to make and what to do with that. Another risk is overtime, again, with the staff shortage. There's significant overtime that's, December 31st, we had 1,600 hours of overtime owed to employees. So that either gets paid out or because they're only allowed to carry over so much, so it either results in paid out or time off, which then backs things up further.
That was 1,600 for this year alone? So
December
far?
31st had 1,600 of 2018, had
2018,
just over 1,600 of overtime hours owed to employees. That includes fire, wastewater, sewer.
Right, primarily.
How many hours does a full-time employee normally work per week?
70. Most of them are 70. The parks and sewer
Sorry,
work.
70 hours a week?
Oh, sorry, 35. Sorry.
I know you're hardworking.
I was thinking the last month. Sorry. Sorry, 35 hours a week. There is certain groups of employees, like the parks employees and sewer, who work 40 hours a week.
Okay. Would you, off the top of your head, know how many hours a year?
It's like...
For a full-time position without overtime?
Without overtime is 1,820?
1,820? Okay.
Yeah.
So the 1,600 hours represents more or less, just a little under one full-time person?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, those are divided up by as many, and some people get it paid out. This is just the balance at December 31st, right? So, some people get it paid out or they take time off. So this was just what was left owing to employees at December 31st. So throughout
Trying
the
to
year.
give context.
Yeah.
Yep.
So again, that's just a big risk, and so hopefully filling some staffing needs will help alleviate some of that overtime and free up staff time to do some proactive planning and thinking.
Sorry, one more question. What rate does overtime get paid at?
It just depends. It starts off at 1.5 up to a certain level. I think it's 3 hours. I'll have to double check in the union agreement. Pardon? 3 hours, and then after 3 hours is that double time.
Thank you.
So, and then the final risk identified is sewer capacity. So capital costs are to maintain the existing system are ever increasing, as well as expansion options will need to be decided in 2019. I guess expansion's been talked about for a few years here since we've opened the sewer. We've already kind of known this. So this is going to be a big decision and a big conversation that needs to happen this year of how this is going to work and how we're going to fund it and all that stuff. So this isn't a 2019 decision to make if we're expanding the sewer per se, but we definitely need to start thinking about it and start planning for it. And I anticipate reports coming back to council this year to start the conversation again and start doing some planning. So I think initially last year's budget had the sewer expansion happening in 2020. Again, we're being realistic. We haven't done any planning for that. There's no way it can be happening in 2020. So it's bumped out to 2021. That's the change from last year. Just again, to be realistic that we want to do this right. It's going to be a big decision. And
I guess this will also be part of the official community plan process. So the community is interested in this happening. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
And
Mr. Schaefer.
Your Worship, in addition to that, the sewer only people who live within the sewer specified area currently take part in this. If there are broader expansions of residential or other uses outside the sewer specified area, that's going to increase demand on the sewer and the plant. And so until that takes place, it kind of constrains what can happen within the district, but outside the sewer specified area as well.
And sewer is self-funded. Like, we don't take property tax dollars to pay for sewer. Like, the people who are in the sewer area contribute in their taxes towards the sewer. So we're not taking from residents who aren't part of the sewer area. So just to confirm that. Okay, so that's enough for risks. Now we're going to go into some opportunities, better things. A couple opportunities are grants. I feel like that this is definitely a big gap for us, is we just haven't had the staff time, we haven't done the proactive thinking, we don't have asset management plans, we're not ready to apply for these grants, and when we hear about a project we want to do, we've potentially missed the window to apply for the grant, or we're rushing an application in, so it's not as good as it could be. So I think this is a huge opportunity for us, is once we know the results of these plans and we can determine what mayor and council's priorities are going to be, we can have staff now proactively looking and trying to find grant money and grant opportunities for us to apply for to help fund and offset some of the costs of these projects that we need to do. So I think that could be a huge gap. For example, the Canada Infrastructure Grant for the multi-sport court lacrosse box. It's potentially $890,000 we could get from the federal, provincial governments to help contribute to the funding of this box. So that's huge. This isn't going to happen without the grant. So, that's just one significant example. But there's lots of other smaller grants that I think we could be looking for.
Your Worship. When it comes to these grants, do we have enough staff let's say we go for these 6 and that we come up. Do we have enough staff that we could devote somebody to look at grants with our present? I'm seeing lots of heads nod in the background, so I kind of think that's my answer. Thank you.
With the current staffing complement, Your Worship, we can't afford to sick anyone specifically full-time on pursuing grants. Other communities have done that, and it's been successful for them, but in Souk's current situation, we don't have a full-timer to look at it. It's off the side of the desk again.
Well, I just want to acknowledge staff for the grants that they do pursue, and we of course approved Tree Canada grant and Lake BC, and the chief here has had a couple of grants and more to come. So thank you for what you're doing. But as you say, there's such a wide terrain out there that with a little extra time for all of you, that would give you a chance to pursue these things.
Definitely, yeah. And some proactive thinking and planning will help us
Councillor
know what grants
St.
to even look for.
Yeah.
Narrow down the scope. So.
Yeah.
Through your worship, would it be possible to get a business case for a full-time grant writer / communication officer?
Sure.
I mean, if we're looking... Is that sorry?
I'm sorry.
Yours is going to be mine.
Because ideally, if we can pull in hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the person's salary, that might be worth it. I mean, obviously, the grants are specific to certain projects. They're not, revenue that we can use for anything we want, so it's not free money. But I'd like to maybe see some sort of an argument for it, because...
Yeah, we can definitely come back with some more information on that, because
Now,
I think that's a huge gap for us, for sure.
Interestingly, in looking at the UBCM best practices for sessions such as this, we would have a strategic plan in place, and an idea like that needs to emerge out of the strategic plan process, I would think. And then, however, this year we're in a different situation, so next year. But our strat plan will begin next month, and I guess ideas like that will flow freely forward, and we'll come to a consensus as a council about those ideas. Councillor St. Pierre.
Through your worship, if we're looking at simply a nuts and bolts budget in terms of a grant writer and what it might actually provide to the community and provide to the community in terms of savings on our budget, ultimately is what I'd be hoping. I'd love to see that before we finish our budget deliberations, because otherwise we need to wait another year before we can actually smarten up, and I'd rather not do that.
And Your Worship, just a word of caution, because I think a grant writer would be a good addition to staff. There is a grant trap that you can fall into if we pursue grants that we can't logistically fulfill the terms of. If we apply for a grant, say, that requires us to build a new park with certain amenities in it, and we just don't have the staff to build the park, then we either finish it halfway and have to give the money back, which is worse, or people stop taking you seriously and you might not be getting grants. So just that word of caution.
Okay, Ms. Gray?
Okay. And then the other item, which I briefly mentioned at the budget kind of orientation, is permits and fees. Most of these fees haven't increased in years or ever. Some don't exist and should be added. So for right now, none of this is factored into the revenue budget that you are in 2019, because we just don't know, and we don't want to tie council's hands to approve a budget that includes fees increases that you haven't even been able to vote on and have a proper conversation about. So excuse me. So that's the anticipation, is a report to council will come forward later this year with options and recommendations for potential permits and fee changes, which will most likely should result in more revenue for the districts and will alleviate the amount needed from property taxes to fund our operations. So that, this is a huge one, and I think this will be, could make some headway on reducing future property tax increases if once we present you some recommendations and you guys can vote on what you feel comfortable with, and then we can factor that into budgets going forward.
Rubbing hands gleefully is inappropriate. Is that right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Councilor Beddoes.
So basically, when it comes to permits and fees, to me, it's something that should be a priority, and we're not going to deal with it this budget time only because our depleted staff can't put something forward to us to basically vote on this time. I don't mean that as a criticism to the staff. I'm well aware of what they're up against, but this is something we'll have to wait for the other plans to come through before we even consider permits and fees, which are long overdue.
Go ahead.
Oh, you go.
Your Worship, I think it's been on the radar since December to get that fees and charges bylaw underway, and I believe Ms. Campbell has started that process in the planning department. Our application fees need to be reviewed, but it's not just the planning fees. There are engineering fees. There are any number of different charges that the district that are available for the district to provide a service. Our fees and charges are intended to cover costs and not to make money, so we can't crank up fees. Just in case anyone listening has the idea that we're going to just grab a bunch of cash and run with it, that can't happen. We have to be able to justify any fee increases to provide the cost of providing the service. So it's, I've heard the cash grab argument before, and frankly, legally, that's not the case. But right now, the fees and charges that we levy don't come anywhere near covering the cost of services.
And yeah, as Don's saying, this is a big project, and we want to do it right because it hasn't been done in years or ever. So we want to make sure we present something to you that's been well researched, thorough, complete, and just the timing. We just haven't had the time to get this ready. Ideally, we would have loved to have had it for this budget ask, but we're just not ready to do it yet. So we want to come back at a future time, because there always is the option at later dates to amend financial plans if we needed to. Or again, factor these in starting 2020, depending on the timing of everything with all the other plans and decisions being made this year. So,
Councillor St. Pierre.
Just to address the cash grab thing, I know that at least in some cases, what's happening is that services are being provided, taking up staff time that in other municipalities would actually have a fee attached. Mm-hmm. And what that means is the staff is no longer available to do things like write grants or provide other services that don't actually have the option of a fee. And this actually increases our overall costs, necessitating things like increases in property taxes. So, far from being a cash grab, it's actually a way to average things out so that people actually use the services, pay for the services, and the average taxpayer doesn't need to actually, look at that increase in cost. And I just wanted to.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, stay tuned for that. That'll be another fun conversation, I'm sure. Okay, so I'm just going to get into a little bit of the details on the expenditures and sources of revenues. I'm not going in the weeds of them all because, as I mentioned earlier, the departments are going to do presentations on their specific line items. So I'm just going to kind of give a high-level overview of these categories. And then if you guys have any questions, we can either jot them down on some of the categories, or else the specific departments might be better tasked to answer your questions when they get to their presentations. Expenditures are increasing 1.97 million over last year. Some of the reasons for the increases are debt servicing increased to 129,000. Our current debts include the fire ladder truck, property purchase of Lot A, and sewer. New debts being added this year are for the water tender truck for the fire department, which has already been purchased, and it's anticipating funding for the first installment on the Engine 3 replacement, which a part of it has to be paid for this year, part of it will be paid for next year, because you have to put a deposit on the chassis. I think Ken can speak to that more in his presentation. That's the debt changes. Capital has increased 751,000 from last year. Departments are going to provide more details on the change on these in their presentations. But just please note, out of the 751,000 being asked for, only 106,000 is being funded through property taxes. The remainders is being funded through various reserves and/or grants that we're applying for. So it is an increase, but it's a small part of it is coming from property taxes. Transfers to reserves are down 203,000. This is keeping property taxes as low as possible for this year. And the transfers to reserves are for, some of them we just have to do as part of our bylaws and part of our rules. So it's for things like DCCs, our capital asset replacement reserves, policing, for future policing costs. And just a note on the policing, if you notice into 2022, I believe, the budget goes up again. And that's because it's anticipated that's when the next census is going to be. And because right now we're a small community, so we get specific reduced policing costs. We have the small community grant. It's anticipated that by the time the next census comes around, we'll be over 15,000 residents. So then that will kind of potentially eliminate some of those, subject to change from the bodies that issue those grants and such. But right now, that's what we're looking at. So that's why that number bumps up, is there's a policing cost where we're anticipating that's going to go up in that year. And then, again, just high level on the other municipal purposes. So this is council, CAO, corporate services, finance, HR departments. Budgets are included in that number. So it's increased 1.29 million this year. Out of that, 343,000 is for the staffing asks, including salaries and budgets for those staffing asks. And again, those have been prorated for estimated start dates this year. There's $125,000 budgeted this year for the OCP, strategic plan, organizational review, that again weren't in the budget before and hadn't have reserves set up. So we are setting up reserves starting in 2021 so that we won't have this problem going forward.
Through your worship, could you say that number again?
The 125,000 is set aside for the OCP, just for year one. The OCP is going to be a multi-year project, but 25,000 year one for OCP. The I think it's in your numbers there. The strategic plans 25, and then I think it's 75 for the organizational review. We're unsure what the organizational review is going to cost. It's just a placeholder for now, based on estimates from other municipalities of what this has costed them when they've done it.
When we were at the LGLA, the average cost that communities were spending, similar sized communities, was closer to. I'm on.
Yeah, you're on. You're good.
I'll probably be off again. It was closer to the total amount that you just said, 125 grand. That's why I was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. It includes parks increases. So parks was a new area we took on a few years ago now. So we're just kind of realizing like how expensive it is to maintain all of the parks, and we're adding more parks, et cetera. So just the cost of maintaining those parks and doing it all in-house, while it costs more, it's definitely more cost efficient than contracting these services out. So there's an increase in there, just reflective of the actual cost of what it's costing to maintain the parks. Road maintenance is included in there, as I mentioned before. Bylaw is increased because it includes a full year of a bylaw officer this year. Last year it was prorated because one started partway through the year. And then sewer has gone up just $263,000 in their contractor and consultant costs. But again, those costs don't get transferred to property tax owners. It's self-funded through the sewer fund and the sewer parcel taxes.
So I guess the taxpayers will, those in the sewer specified area, through their parcel tax.
Through their parcel tax, yes.
Right. And do we
pay
know
for
how
that.
much it's going up at this point?
I'm not sure.
No, okay.
I'm not sure how that works. I can get back to you on that one for
Fine,
sure.
thank you.
Yeah. So it is self-funded, and we do have a reserve for the sewer. So basically, every year, if you look on the sewer sheets, we basically make it balanced by either contribution to reserves or pulling money out of reserves when we need to. So you'll see in the years, a few years we're taking money out, a few years we're putting money in to the reserve. It just depends on the balance of what we're estimating the expenses are going to be. So some years are harder than others depending on what's going on. Rob will talk more too about the sewer projects that are going on there, so he can give you some more details. And then just to kind of end on a high note is revenue. So revenue is increasing 1.97 million over 2018. 764,000 of this is from property tax, at least in this draft budget that you have before you. So it results in approximately $87 per homeowner based on last year's rates. So it's not as
Say again?
$87 approximately. So just based on the current numbers. Just the way that, because it's not all residents, there's industry tax rates, businesses, they all have different tax rates. So this is just for the average resident. 87, yeah. And so we have some preliminary results from PZ assessment stats that show average assessment increased $42,000 this year over last year, and there's 178 new folios added to SUC from between 2018 to 2019. Sewer parcel taxes, again, this is just like a self-funding, so it funds the operations of the sewer and has no impact on property taxes. And new parcels being added will basically help increase the revenue coming into that fund. The other sources of revenue that we get are payment in lieu of taxes, the 1% utility taxes that we get, government grants. So again, this number's up this year too because we are applying for a big Canada Infrastructure Grant. So that's bigger than any other grant that I've seen so far that we've applied for. As well as our Municipal Financing Authority borrowings. So that is going to be increased because there's some sewer borrowings we need to do, as well as borrowings for the fire trucks that I touched on earlier. Fees and charges, minor increases, $37,000, and it's again, as I mentioned, this is going to be reviewed later this year. And a report will be brought forward to you with some recommendations on what we can do for this going forward, because we definitely can do better in this area. But for now, it's status quo because that's what we're charging. And then transfers to from own funds shows a little bit lower this year, and that's because 2018 had a large transfer to the sewer. So it's just this number is still higher than I personally would like it, and it's not sustainable in the long term. So it is the number that's in there now to try and keep this property tax rate as low as possible and potentially increase as low as possible. But it's not sustainable, as you can see from the reserve fund balances. So this is a stopgap for this year. But tough questions and answers are going to have to happen this year to decide how we're going to do this in 2020 and forward. I'll kind of stop there. Because then I'm next to kind of briefly touch on our GIS and IT department, but I'll just pause there for a second if there's anything you guys wanted to talk about or any questions or anything, or if you want us to just kind of continue on into the departments.
Councillor McMath. Yes.
Thank you so much. I can't say that enough to everybody, because I know that staffing is so tight and everybody's chipping in, and that takes away from your other projects that you're working on. So we really, really appreciate that. And paring it down makes it a lot easier, especially for myself. Simplifies it so we don't have to try to make judgment calls on some things. I think the most important thing as we go forward is communicating why we're where we are now to the public, because they're going to see a clickbait headline, much like the remuneration, where it's like,
Totally.
council gets a 15% raise, and people get very upset very quickly. But if they had the actual facts, it's like, oh, it's $2,500 a year. So that's the same premise that we're going to run into here. Is they're going to see a tax increase, they're going to be very upset. But if they have the facts ahead of that sort of clickbait headline, that will go so far to like eradicate all of that. They'll be upset, essentially. Yeah, and so exactly. And so explaining that, that low tax, no tax thing, you will pay for it later.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. And showing them that what you're asking for, these aren't extravagant items. These are just bare bone essentials is so important. So
Definitely, yeah.
thank you very much for your work.
Thanks.
Yes, well said. I think this communications committee that the mayor announced the other night, but yeah, communicating these kind of matters are important. Greg Moore, if you recall, at the LGLA, in that opening address, the mayor of Port Coquitlam, formerly, he noted that their budget document was a super document. And I did go online and had a look at it, and it's really beautifully explained, lots of visuals. Our current plans have always, as I said at one of our meetings, it's always a bit of a challenge. I brought my magnifying glass today. And I did note that maybe 4 or 5 years ago there was a great executive summary appended to the start of a 5-year financial plan, and that too is the kind of things that the simplification, as you've just explained it remarkably well, Ms. Gray, the reasons that we're looking at what we're looking at here. So,
Yeah, and definitely going forward, like there's lots of, when I have more time, there's definitely lots of tweaks and improvements, and like you're saying, the communication is key in this and why we're in where we're at. And I don't know all of the history, but what I do know is, and you guys are aware of, is there's a reason why we're here today, asking for what we're asking for, and we're trying to fix this now and then be proactive so that we're not here with this every year. So.
Councillor St. Pierre.
Just a very quick one. We can see if I was sitting over there.
Well, I'm almost done, so.
So in general, it would be easier for people if we were all kind of running a bit advanced and a bit of an outlier.
I think we have
Gone
word
but
from
not forgotten.
Councillor Logans will be joining us, I think, around 4 o'clock. She's just doing the EMCS exit interviews. And I think so is Councillor Parkinson. So they'll be joining us. And Maya should be up any minute now to take up. Councillor McMath.
We're quite late in the game. So going forward, besides the budget approval, is it feasible if the suggested staff hires are made, is it feasible for you to get to the point where we can start doing the budget review in October, November for 2019?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. That is, assuming, all things where they're at, and I'm still sitting here in front of you next year or in October. That is absolutely my plan, is to do this process a lot earlier so that these decisions can be made, prioritizing can be made, and that will make it a lot easier for us to plan and determine.
Exactly. And like
what
when we had our
grants
community grant.
Exactly.
We were really in that really awkward position where we're supposed to be giving money, but we're kind of blind. So.
Exactly. And then also throughout the year, any reports going forward to council throughout the year, because decisions come up throughout the year that are going to ask for additional funds to be paid out of X fund. Mm-hmm. So definitely council will be fully informed of where this money is coming from, what the current balance is in the fund, what this is going to mean. So just, more information in a timely manner, I think will help make more informed decisions.
Yeah.
And starting this process absolutely earlier internally with staff will help. And then we can have more time. We won't be pressed for time because this has to be done by May 15th. So,
fabulous.
Yeah.
Councillor St. Pierre.
I believe in previous meetings there was note that there are probably some funds out there that are either for projects that have been gone by the wayside or not going to happen at all, and so on and so forth. I don't expect that it's a lot, but is there a good use of resources to go through those lists and see what can be scraped together?
Well, I've tried to, we can look into it a little further, but I've definitely tried to go even at least to 2018 and some of the projects that haven't completed. Like you'll hear a little bit more about them in the department-specific presentations, but any project that didn't get started in 2018. We had a conversation about it this year to say, are we doing this or not? And if not, then we went and adjusted the balances if they came out of reserves or whatever. I did a kind of an opening reconciliation on the reserves to ensure that it reflected what actually occurred last year, and then as well as an opening balance just from our audited financial statements, some small adjustments from that. So there's most of the projects in here are carrying forward from last year because they didn't finish last year. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question, then maybe.
I don't think I'm thinking of current projects or projects that are underway, but more things that might have happened, in the last 10 years. Some money was set aside, or some dispensation for money to be set aside. I don't know if this is actually the case or not. Maybe this is not the case. But
I don't think, I would assume most of those projects would have been funded in the reserve funds that we have here. So, maybe a bigger project to kind of reconcile all of those. And once this is done, I'm switching gears to your end. So I'll have some maybe better information on the reserves and what's going on. But the opening balance in the reserves match our 2017 closing balances from our audited financial statements. So that should have all been covered, I believe. But I'll definitely know a little more later on in the coming months. Okay.
Okay, so we do have, Councillor Beddoes.
I just want to surmise there's no magic pool of money there to dip into, and I think that's what
I wish if it was there, I would have tried. I would have found it. So, yeah.
Okay.
And just one addition to that, I think if staff and council create some positive feedback loops about communication of where we're at, what we're up to, administratively, where it's project status issues, council could and probably should be better informed about the bigger issues that have really serious budget impacts throughout the year, rather than waiting until even October or November to lay them on you in a one big budget document. So I hope to be able to set up some of those feedback loops and processes so that council can review its strat plan at the beginning of next year to see what we got done, what we didn't get done. Throughout the course of the year, if there's a project that's clearly not going to get done, we could reschedule that or refit it somehow. And so council would be aware when being questioned by members of the public whose pet project that might happen to be, rather than having you say, I don't know, staff never tells us anything, because that, potentially sometimes that happens. But if we tell you what we're doing and you're better informed, then I think that's a far better way to proceed than otherwise.
For sure, and definitely some quarterly reporting will be coming back on a regular basis to council to kind of show you with the final approved budget, here's where we're at, here's what, status updates basically on where everything's at, and I don't think that's been happening as regularly before, so then things get forgotten about or whatever happens with it. So, yeah.
So before I surrender the chair and the gavel here back to our mayor, I just say that, yes, we have just like to acknowledge again that we have been receiving a lot of information from staff from the get-go, from our first orientation, these ongoing orientations. So thank you for keeping us in the loop. Mm-hmm. And on that note, power. So goes to the head. Okay.
Through whichever chair we're dealing with at the moment, I just wanted to make a comment to our CAO there is what you were saying about the communications. One thing I've noticed in my short time here is that does need to improve, and I'm glad that staff is thinking about that. It's not as though we want to interfere. It's just that we need to know what's going on because we get asked questions a lot of times, and I'm tired of going, really? Huh? And I'd like to keep abreast of what's coming down the pipe. So thanks for that thought.
Okay. So then, unless, I don't know, sorry, Maya, you're just coming out, so I'm not sure if you have anything. I just finished the overview
Okay.
And then I was going to get into, I'm just doing the first GIS IT department presentation, and then we're turning it over to Ivy, who will be doing the planning presentation.
That's excellent. I think the acting mayor just said that we're up for public question and comment at this point on what has been presented thus far. So, anything at this time?
If I may say so.
You'll need to come to the microphone so we can all hear you and introduce yourself and address, all that good stuff. You turn on the microphone.
There we go.
Excellent.
My name is Lise Johansen, and I live on Solon Road North, and that's it. That's good? Yeah. Okay. So I just want to say I've been here 6 or 7 meetings now, and I can't agree more than I find a huge disconnect, which has been very frustrating for me. It was very embarrassing at the grant application night, where it took about 20 minutes for you to really get everyone on board about how much money there was and the fallout if we did this or if we did that. And I wholeheartedly agree with when you do a report on what is going on from here on, it's very, very important that everyone that is interested via email or whatever, however they do it in the paper or whatever, that it's really strongly about this is something that has to be cleaned up from prior. Because right now, I can't believe how many times I get into discussions and I have to defend, because I feel everyone is doing a really good job with what you have inherited. So the more that it can become really clear is that you guys don't just come in and start making a whole bunch of rules or expenditures or whatever and give yourself a raise and all that stuff. I mean, so that, speaking as a public person, that is so important that you get that out there. That's it.
Thank you very much for your feedback and for joining us today. Okay, back over to Ms. Gray, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm just, it's one slide. I got one slide on GIS and IT. GIS is the Geographic Information System, which I believe you're getting some more info on later this week or maybe next week. It's some really cool mapping software that does amazing things, and Brian's will, I'm sure, give you a pretty cool deep dive into the GIS system. So it's pretty high level. There's not a lot of asks. Most of these are standard items. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of the new asks. So for GIS system, they're asking for $3,000 over and above last year's ask. And this is to have a membership with the National Asset Management Strategy Association. And that $3,000 gives us a tool that does financial analysis of assets, which is then used in asset management planning. It also includes templates for asset management policies and strategies. So this is a small bit of money that will really help us more effectively manage our assets. We currently do some of asset management through the GIS system and the NAMS, but this is just one more add-on that will help our future planning, and with all the plans going on, that is just one increase that we're asking for over and above last year. For IT, these are standard light items that have kind of been in the budget every year. They are funded $35,000 from gas tax reserves, and the remaining $93,000 is funded from the capital asset replacement reserve. So these ones do not come out of property. They're not in the $106,000 I mentioned earlier coming out of property taxes. These historically come from the reserve funds that we have created for them. So it's got $28,000 in there for computer equipment. So this is just would be buying equipment for the new staff we're looking for, as well as asset renewals for our current existing equipment as they come up for service. Software has a $75,000 ask in there. This includes this is a continuation of a project that started last year to do more of our records on a SharePoint kind of collab space, Office 365 situation to get us more efficient and in our records keeping. So this is just the continuation of the project that started last year. So it's a one-time $50,000 just to do the final piece of the upgrade that started in 2018. There's excuse me, $10,000 added in there for what our system Tempest. It's to add again, this was already kind of in the works. This is just a carryover from last year. This is to add an e-apply and module to Tempest, which will allow more fees to be paid by credit card, which a lot of people have been asking for. It includes some startings of this My City service, which residents will be able to log on to and see a lot of cool information about their property and such. It also will provide options for setting up online applications from residents. So this is what we're looking for to do the building permit processes online. Almost all of our permits and fees at some point, could be transitioned over to this versus the manual process that happens now. So that'll just make things a lot more efficient. So again, these projects were already started last year. They're just carrying forward to this year. The remaining balances of these are just carrying forward to this year. There's $5,000 in here for a website refresh. Our current website was created in-house by a former employee and now has many patches and such on it. So we're looking to hire someone just to help us update and streamline it and clean up the patches. We can make some quick improvements to our website that I think this $5,000 will quickly make our website a lot more user-friendly than it currently is. Mobile version would be nice to have. So that's kind of just a placeholder for putting some funds towards that. And the other IT ask is network wiring of $20,000. Again, this has been in the budget for many years. This is just, again, trying to actually get it done this year. So this is just upgrading lots of our wiring, which is old and out of date, and patched together in the ceiling somewhere up there. So that is their ask. And then software licensing has an increase, but that's offset by an increase or decrease in some other internet costs. Our IT department has worked really hard to consolidate a lot of our functions to one supplier or one vendor, which has reduced savings. So you'll see that the software line item is increased, but we used to purchase software, and so we're just doing different options with paying for this now. So in the end, it's actually only a $3,000 increase with the savings we were able to find in other line items. And then equipment lease is increased by $9,000 because we are leasing more equipment than outright purchasing equipment because it needs to come up for renewal so often, and we've done some analysis, and it's better. It's more cost effective to lease this equipment than buy it outright and have to maintain it and repair it and then eventually save to replace it. So that's the big increases in the GIS and IT budget.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bateman, you had a question?
I did have a question. I was hoping you could offer page references for these each of these items. But this is our capital plan for 2019 on page 8, I believe. And I was thinking I was right, but then I noted the IT operating doesn't seem to be on here, the $38,000 and the $9,000, unless I'm missing.
Oh, those are from operating, so those would be found in the actual department budget.
Okay. So the department budget.
Which will be on page 16.
Okay. Good.
So yeah, those bottom two line items are from just operating, day-to-day operating increases, and they're not capital items. So it's just showing that they've gone up over, if you compare the numbers to last year, they've increased, but I was just explaining why that they're increasing.
Thank you. One question just that comes up to mind from IT, not really applicable to the budget though, is in my conversations with our IT specialist, because our emails are on the website, we are constantly, like he showed me this printout that for my email in particular, like daily, there's hundreds of people trying to hack it. So there's spam that's filtered out, and so I have that two-factor authentication now so that nobody can actually do that. And part of it is, it's quite interesting looking at the reports, and it's because our emails are noted on the website attached to a person. Like there are just, I don't know, like crawlers, I guess, that go out and scour websites and find them and try to hack in. And at one point I actually got an email from somebody saying, hey, I've taken over your email and I know which website you were looking at and I'm going to show that to the world. And I thought, okay, well, I was on the CRD's website. Is that really that exciting? But whatever. And sent it on, and he's like, no, I got the same one. Like, this is sort of typical, because then they want you to click in and pay them in Bitcoin and whatever weirdness comes out. Whereas things like the info@souk.ca, it's not attached to a personal profile, so it doesn't get that same level of interest from people trying to take over accounts. Now, we have put our emails out there to make ourselves available to the public. So it's just something to think about, because then in doing so, what have we opened ourselves up to, and what are we paying for to secure ourselves against because of that? Whereas anyone can email info@souk.ca and get to us in that way. And that, you know, from a security perspective, it's just like, it's kind of important. And then, of course, anyone who phones the district would be given our email or whatever. Like, we're quite accessible. So
We still have to pay for that because it's staff time now that would go into that. So either way, we're going to pay. So taking us out just means that anyone responding to info is going to have to, that will take away from their work because they'll be.
yeah, I get that. I just don't know. Like, so it's just something I think just to think about that, like every day, like, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of attempts on my email, and probably yours and others as well, which is like a bit creepy. It's a bit creepy, actually. You know, and I get that we will always have to pay for things to secure ourselves and the like. It's just, what are we putting out there, and is it actually necessary? I don't know. I think that if an email of import, because then it's the case of someone emails me something, mayor and council, I email it to all of you, and then they also email info. Now you're getting it twice, and staff are dealing with it twice. So from an efficiency perspective, what is the best way here? I'm not sure exactly, and it's kind of not a budget-related one, but I just want to throw it out there so that we can start talking about it, because then it's the case. I've seen this before 3 times now. How many times do I need to read it? I don't know.
I can delete them pretty fast.
Yeah. So anyway, we get a lot of emails.
Well, and I think our IT, that's why our IT department is looking really close at consolidating everything we can and having one source of information, so it's going to be a lot easier to identify any of those kind of threats and set up blockers for that. You know, I always get the, this has been quarantined, is this really a message email? So yeah, it's a lot of work. You know, the one-time costs to set all this stuff up obviously are there, but they pay for themselves in the long run for sure. So.
Yeah, I was just shocked by how many every day. Anyway, okay. Carry on, please. Thank you.
Okay, well, that is it for me for GIS and IT. Unless you had any other questions about that, then I will turn it over. Or do we have to do questions? Yes. Public questions? I didn't know if we had to do public questions.
Oh, any? Okay, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Technically. So I'll turn it over to Ivy Campbell, who will start with the planning presentation.
Good afternoon. My presentation is going to be fairly brief, and some of it you'll have already heard at the orientation, but I believe someone told me once you say something 3 times and it sticks, so I'm just going to repeat. And the 3rd time will be during the council tour. So. And I believe the planning budget's on page 17 in your package under the departmental budgets. It's very, very short. Okay. So a little bit about the services that we offer. The planning department, as mentioned before, is a steward for the official community plan, local area plans like the town center plan, for example, design guidelines and the zoning bylaw, and the development application process. As a steward, we're responsible for the creation, interpretation, application, and at times their amendments. All departments are impacted in one way or another, so we all have a sharing interest in those documents. It's our role to make sure that all master plans and other strategic plans and policies cohesively tie back to the official community plan. And guided by the policies in the OCP first and also by other master plans and regulatory bylaws, we collaborate with community stakeholders to develop and recommend policy that promote effective land use strategies to improve quality of life for Sooke residents. We manage the development application process from start to recommendation and in some cases to decision. So this is just a slide of what the planning department looks like. We have 3 full-time staff, so that's 2 planners and 1 planning assistant. So myself and Tanisha, and then Susan is the planning assistant. We have 1 part-time planner that's currently on mat leave, and she's a 0.6 FTE, and she'll be returning April 1st. Nicholas Diebler is the auxiliary planner, planner 1 in her place right now. So we have a total of 3.26 staff, or 2.5 planners and an assistant. We are, as the Deputy Director of Finance mentioned, a revenue-generating department, similar to some other departments. But all application fees paid to the district go, from what I understand, into a single revenue fund that's shared across the organization. Application fees have our cost recovery, as also mentioned before. In Sooke, that cost recovery is not historically included the hourly rate of individual processing the applications. And to date, I believe salaries are covered solely by the tax rates, which you already know. In 2018, the revenues generated from the planning applications covered less than a quarter of the costs of the staff processing those applications, approximately just over $92,000. So that would be like sign permits, development permits, variance permits, rezoning, ALR fees, and the such. And that's less than my salary with benefits. Just less than that. So the development application fees are covered under Bylaw 490, which is what the snapshot is on the screen, and they were adopted in 2011 and haven't been increased since that time. Increased fees and introduction of new fees. For example, we have a lot of pre-app meetings, so pre-application meetings that are when people want to come in and discuss a concept and ask questions. We don't charge for that, and those actually take up a lot of our time, and there's usually a planner, an engineering tech, subdivision person, and someone else in that room. So there's 4 or 5 staff often every time, and they're at least a minimum of an hour at a time, and sometimes people are coming in multiple times for pre-apps, and some communities charge a fee for that time, and they might later apply it to the actual application, but it also helps deter just prospectors or realtors that really may not be coming in with a serious application. So you take that fee and they don't get it back, but potentially we could take a fee and then apply it to an actual application fee with someone who's serious. So these are the things that we're considering. So I am looking at I'm reviewing the Bylaw 490 now for some changes along with the Schedule A and all the fees. This is just the development application fees. Like was mentioned before, building has its own fees, engineering, subdivision, all in separate places. Most communities consolidate those fees into one consolidated fees bylaw, and I think that's what the Clerk's Department is looking at doing at some point. And I think, as mentioned by one of you, that should be a priority going forward, because it would be cleaner to then just take one bylaw to council every year and make an adjustment or have a consumer price index increase annually or something. So we are working on the planning one, so I will be bringing a report to you later this year on our application fees. In terms of new line items in the planning budget, you'll see the OCP fund prorated over about 2.5 years. So the RFP probably won't go out until later this spring or early summer, and so it won't be kicking off until the summer. So there likely won't be any invoicing until, there might be some small invoice in 2019, but most of it will come out the following year. And it is possible, so there's about $200,000 prorated in there, and it's possible after receiving proposals, as mentioned by Ms. Gray, that $200,000 may need to get adjusted, because that's an estimate based on the cost of our existing OCP, which was done almost 10 years ago. Also in there is a reserve fund that I requested to be set up so that we're not coming to you again for another $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to do all our master plans at the same time 10 years from now.
Okay.
Rather put away a certain amount.
Where are those figures in here? I'm on page.
They were page 17, is that not right?
The budget for those items sit in the CAO's office. So on page apologies. On page 14 are the line items for the OCP. Is where you'll see that number.
Page 14.
Page 14. They're grouped in with the CAO's office.
Yeah, so they're in the CAO's office budget, but because they're managed by planning, they also kind of show, and that's why I'm speaking to them. Yes. Sorry about that. So yes, ideally like around $40,000 per year to be set aside every year over 10 years, so that by the time we have to renew all of these plans again, we have, a slush fund to pull on. But we've pushed that off to start in 2021, I believe. So to
not a
bring
slush
it
fund.
No,
So
not
we
a
don't
slush
say
fund.
slush fund.
Sorry.
Terminology
I'm
is
new to
really
budget.
important here.
That's a wrong term.
It's a
Reserve
discretionary
fund.
expenditure fund.
Okay. Thank you. You also may be wondering about, so if you go, I believe, back to page 17 under the planning budget, the contractor line item for $35,000. That amount was allocated from council contingency and the affordable housing reserve for the purpose of the housing needs assessment. So it's just, those decisions have been made, but it's now being formally reflected in the budget. There's also a small increase to memberships and professional development line items under planning. Starting, so the membership this year and then again in next year is a slight increase, and then there is an increase for professional development starting in 2020. This is a reflection of the increase in membership fees from the professional organizations and the fact that planning has a new position, which is mine, the head of planning, that wasn't accounted for in those line items previously. And I'd just like to say, those memberships are really important to planning staff, and paying for memberships not only adds to the district's credibility for employing professionals that are recognized, regulated, and insured by a professional body, but also act as employee retention and an attraction tool. In addition, being a member of an accredited professional organization requires maintaining annual credits through training, so hence the reflection of the professional development increase. They're fairly nominal. In terms of staffing, the planning department's requesting an approval for a 3-month extension to our auxiliary planner 1. It's the mat leave for Tara Johnson, and she'll be extending her mat leave by a month, so she's returning April 1st rather than early March. And getting this extension would allow to cover for that, for the maternity leave extension, and also some transition time for when she returns. We've also applied for a provincial grant for a planning summer student. The grant covers about 50% of the costs. The student planner will be working on things like the zoning bylaw housekeeping items, assisting with some of the master planning projects and some other research work. So ultimately, I believe the planning budget's pretty reasonable. It's, I think, equivalent to about 0.6% tax increase, and that's pretty significant change to my original list that shocked and awed all the department. It was 3.5% tax increase just for planning. They said wish list, so that's what I gave. But we've prorated some things. There were some other staffing requests that we've removed in light of waiting for strategic plan and an organizational review. And so stay tuned for 2020.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Councillor McMath, and then myself.
Just when you are going through review of permits and that report that you're going to bring forward, will it fall under you as well reviewing the tender process? So if you have, what I'm talking about? When you have a project and you put the bid out, people come back, and that selection process and the contract for that, will you be doing the review for that, or where would that fall?
I think that falls under corporate services, but
through your worship, are you referring to specifically planning related projects? And because I would write the RFPs for, for example, Lot A, Charette, I dealt with that. The housing needs assessment, our department will deal with that, a child care needs assessment. But are you referring to a policy with respect to all RFP process in the organization?
Yeah, sorry, the latter.
Either CAO.
And Your Worship, I think corporate services in the CAO's office would probably manage most of the procurement aspects, the tenders, RFPs, RFQs. Obviously in concert with whichever department is looking to procure a service or a good. For instance, with the engineering department, I would certainly feel uncomfortable with me or Ms. Machada or anybody else who didn't understand the ins and outs of what was happening, say at the wastewater treatment plant, writing a document with technical specs. So there obviously has to be a lot of back and forth between departments when we put these things together. But by and large, I would assume that that would fall under either finance or the CAO's office.
Okay, I just bring it forward because it's another opportunity for increased revenue, or at least stopping loss of revenue. Thank you.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Just trying to get at the heart of something. The $92,000 for a revenue-generating department like planning, that's strictly DCCs and service fees and the like? No.
Sorry, the $92,000, $92,462. That's from the application fees. That's the money that's generated when people apply for development permits, for zoning applications. That's it. DCCs are collected through at building permit stage and calculated at subdivision stage.
Okay. So through your worship, that means that the planning department generates revenues by those means, but also by negotiating and creating or developing assets for the community, sidewalks, parks, and so on and so forth, when we go through a variance process or zoning amendments and so on and so forth. You're not counting that stuff either, are you?
No, through your worship, I'm not counting anything we might acquire for other departments, like cash in lieu for parking or sidewalks through a zoning or development process. No, this is just what we've generated through pure applications. And we do review building permits. We interact and support each other in many ways, but this is purely what the externals pay for an application process.
The 92 seemed extraordinarily low and doesn't necessarily seem to reflect what the actual work and the resources that the planning department brings to the municipality, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Councillor Bateman?
Thank you. I was really interested in that shock and awe, 3.5%. And just so and I would welcome this of all of your presentations. In a perfect world, what were those items that you needed to let go of in this imperfect world?
Through your worship, when asked for a wish list, when I was hired, it was about building up the planning department and what would be ideal in the planning department and based on the needs of this community. And what I saw in an org chart is what I put on that wish list. So if there was a director of planning, then ideally you'd have a senior planner, planner 2, planner 1, a planning tech, and then a planning assistant, so that there was a window for succession planning, there was opportunity for mentorships and ability to assign more senior people to more policy-oriented strategic work and dealing with council, notices of motion, sort of those random pickups, and then the standard current planning, I'd call it, is the applications type of planning. So that was my ideal world, is to have that full complement. And but we do need to go through an org review, and there's a number of other more important positions that are needed right now.
To our CAO?
And your worship, Ms. Campbell was certainly not the only disappointed department head. When we first started the budget process a couple of months ago, there was a lot of talk, I think, about putting forward the ideal world budget. But then we looked at the potential tax hit and thought, oh, no, that's not going to happen. So we wanted to bring something that was realistic but help build toward, what in 3 or 4 years could be an ideal world. And people were, your staff was very cooperative in doing that and very positive, putting forward things that we could do now to start laying the foundation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And so I'm looking forward to that bylaw 490 coming to us, and I really like the idea of a consolidated schedule so that it's everything together. When you bring that to us, I'm curious what the history was. So probably some fees applied pre-incorporation. Then what did the increase to? What did the increase to? And then now what is being proposed? 2011. So, that's a long time. And, even prior to 2011, when was the last time they were reviewed? And did they, or 2016 they last adjusted? But they even, I don't even know what changed. So to me, it's the case where, as Councillor St. Pierre said, the 90-some thousand is not fully recognizing the work that is involved, and I don't know that does the development community recognize the work involved to process that application, because then it is the taxpayer that is basically paying for development. And then is that reasonable to the taxpayer now to pay for development? It should be, how in some ways can development pay for itself? Because we have all these other things that we want to do to benefit the community as the whole that we need planning expertise on. And that's where I think taxes should fund that, because that is a benefit to everybody. I like your idea of, sort of the pre-application. So is there, and maybe you can see what this looks like. Or if someone makes an application, it applies to a pre-app meeting and pays X, then that goes or is discounted off an actual application. That sounds really good. Do they get a free half hour one time? Is a whatever? I think it's just because I think it's a great service that we provide, but on the other hand, it seems that there are great expectations, and sometimes about, well, I've come in now and all of you should be made available for me. Well, no, they're all busy doing other people's applications and other good work of council. So, yeah, I think it's timely to see that all come forward. And I'll throw this out there just for now, is I also think for the sewer, and I know this will be another department discussion, I would like to know if we can, what it would take to look at a metered system there. But maybe I'll wait till we get into that discussion on that. But I'm just throwing it out there now so that you know I'm thinking about it, and I'm going to raise it later. No, it's the case where the parcel tax, and this will come up in another department, but anyone on sewer pays X for a parcel tax. If you have an authorized suite, you pay another portion of parcel tax. But now everyone has suites. We're not collecting that added revenue. And you have some residents that are saving and doing water conservation that are paying same as X that is doing nothing. So if it's meter-based based on water, maybe there's a more equitable way to do it. I don't know, but I think it's timely to look at it.
Is that, to the mayor, that's when you do your water input and you pay on that for your sewer, right?
Yeah, because
the water in goes water out. It goes somewhere. We don't drink much.
No, because the water, in other jurisdictions, they use not the summertime when you're watering, but your winter rates to know what your water consumption is and then come up. It would obviously has to be a base amount. But we'll get into this in the sewer part because I'm totally have thrown this off topic. I just want you to know that I'm thinking about it. But I think all the fees need to be looked at, and just so that people aren't like, wow, you've just increased them by 110%. Well, they may need to be because they have done nothing for X amount of period, and it's, how else are we going to generate revenue? Is it fair that it's on the residential taxpayer, or is it the case that there has to be a balance where it's coming from development? And does it vary according to the complexity of an application? So someone is doing, wants to build one house versus 10. I guess they're all individual building permits, but for development permits, 4 or more units. So 5 versus 50, and they're all paying the same? I don't know. Maybe they are or they aren't, but I think that really needs to be looked at. And but just, what is the history here? And then annually, I think revising with cost of living would be is reasonable, perhaps. Future council discussion, but thank you for flagging it, and I look forward to that. Okay, other bits on planning, and thank you for noting about the extension. I think that makes sense, and also having that crossover so that when our planner returns, it's not suddenly, okay, here's all this stuff for you, I'm out. Like, there has to be a way of sharing that intelligence and rolling forward, so I'm glad that you've caught that.
On that, there is a bit of sense of urgency because his time's out the end of March.
Okay.
Just, drive that.
Got it. Well, we'll get through the budget in no time, actually, if I stop talking. Anything else from anyone on this piece? Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell, and to your department as well.
Your Worship, Council, while we're on the train of fees, it wasn't part of my presentation, but I just want to make clear that we also, in the subdivision world, have fees. It's called Bylaw 404. Bylaw 404 establishes the fees for a number of lots being created by subdivision. It also enables us to charge for engineering plan reviews generally, and a few other things, and it also needs to be reviewed. It was created in 2014 as part of the Subdivision and Development Servicing Bylaw, which regulates not only subdivisions but building permit applications as well. DCCs are also applicable to subdivision activity, and I just wanted to get that out there because it really wasn't part of my presentation today, but I thought while we were in that kind of mode that I would put it out there. So
yeah, we'll want to see that one brought forward too.
It was the concept to have all fee schedules brought into one document, because when I first came here, back whenever that was, I missed a couple. It was a wee bit embarrassing that somebody got away with not paying their fair share because I didn't know all the intricacies of where all the bylaws were hidden. Now it's a little bit better. We have everything listed in the way of bylaws and charges and fees, etc. But it would be nice to have them in one comprehensive package. So we will get there.
Well, and that gives twofold. So if somebody says, what does it cost me to develop? Here it is, and it's one thing, and you're not hunting for different bylaws. It's in one place. I think that is useful going back the other way.
Yeah.
And if they complain to everybody that our fees are too high.
Yeah.
It's not just in Souk, it's every community that they'll say the fees are too expensive.
And again, as a follow-up to the water metering for the sewer, it wasn't that wasn't something that I was that I came prepared for today to talk about, but I can loop around, and since my time here, it has been discussed on several different occasions. We've actually walked into an agreement with Capital Regional District water purveyor that they would they would give us their billing for a year, and then we could extrapolate what the water use is. This was brought forward to council about 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago now, and there was quite a dialogue about it because, as you say, the parcel tax isn't overly fair with regards to somebody paying for a use when they're not there, etc. And it was, for the lack of better words, it was defeated, and we never proceed to search it again. But certainly, if it's an appetite on behalf of Mayor and Council, we can certainly look at it again, because I think that, working with the CRD, we can certainly get the information and go forward. So
thank you, Mr. Howard, and I'm just going to talk about it a bit now. So an example would be like, I don't know the exact number, say $600 is what you pay for, if you're on the sewer specified area, you pay $600 for your house. If you have a registered suite with the district, you would pay, say, $300. I'm just using these numbers because they're simple. Now suites are approved in every zone, but that doesn't mean that everyone ran in and said, hey, I have a suite. So in some cases, some people who have done that are paying $900, and down the road someone is paying $600 with a suite. So there's an inequity there. The other point is you could have a family who doesn't use or that is using it as an Airbnb, say, constant turnover, washing, cleaning, and using all of this, and is now paying more. You could have a family of 2 paying $600 next to a family of 8, and they're all paying the same. And then you have some that are doing, maybe buying energy savings appliances that are trying to conserve water, but they're not seeing that reflected. So in some cases, I just would like to see that looked at so that those that are conserving don't, you're rewarded when you conserve your water. You pay according to what your use is. But for sewer, it's like just flush away and it's all good. Now, yes, you are paying more in water when you do that, but water is a relatively inexpensive utility bill to pay. So it's more the case of the suites, and this is one way for us to start figuring out where these suites are, where these Airbnbs are. If there's a home business that we don't know about in the community that's operating without a business license or a business in a residential area, it's just a way of starting to capture that. But it's also that everyone is sort of paying in a more equitable way, I think, because it varies. So that's just my thoughts on that. Is I don't remember that discussion. It might have happened when I was on leave, and then it never went anywhere. And then I'm like, well, what about the water sewer? And everyone's, we had dealt with it. Well, now it's timely as we look for sewer expansion. What does that look like? How can we have the system and users actually pay appropriately for it? And of course, it only impacts those on sewer. Those that are not, there's no impact to them because they're maintaining their own septic field. But in terms of those on sewer, it's something to look at, particularly with the suite piece.
It's done in other jurisdictions.
It is. This isn't new. This is like, and it would be like, not metering for water, which, we do if you're on piped water, and if you have your own well, you maintain and deal with that or bring in water on your own. So it is the case, I think it's just a more modern way. And in terms of the CRD, as it goes ahead with its sewer treatment, it's going to be using water, and it already does, to forecast what their sewer calculation is. And it may be the case where in terms of operating our system, maybe there has to be a set base amount, and then if your use is higher, you pay more. I don't know, but that's where it's just looking at that intel and making good decisions there. Councillor St. Pierre?
I would entirely agree. I think that one of the things that the system presently does is it subsidizes waste and penalizes people who are actually being careful about the future and about not wasting those resources. And that's exactly what happens in a flat fee system. Yeah. So it happens in all sorts of different areas, but this is certainly one of the most egregious.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Howe. We look forward to more information on that.
Thank you. I can hardly wait. Generally speaking, first of all, I really want to take time to thank Rachel Gray for putting this budget together and helping me out immensely. I don't know what I would have done without her here, and I just want to thank you very much. Thank
you. I'm applauding our staff team efforts. Yes, I know. Thank you.
Anyway, I'll go to the first slide. Maybe. There. This is a general overview of what Development Services does. Our engineering department, currently we have 2 engineering technologists who look after road drainage, public works, calls for services, dead animals, etc., as well as our maintenance contract. And as I said, we have 2 engineering technologists currently. Paul Butterfield, who is here this afternoon, and Brian Derrick, who is diligently working in his office. One of the asks that I have for this year in our budget is the reinstatement of the municipal engineer for the engineering services. This position was dropped, I believe, in 2016 or 2017, and it was not filled. I sort of inherited the role. I am not a professional engineer, so I don't have the mechanisms to mentor or train. I don't have that kind of education. The benefit of having a municipal engineer back on staff is, again, mentoring and training the junior engineering staff, the efficient and quick turnaround on design parameters and civil engineering review. We spend an enormous amount of time doing that because I have forgotten a lot of it over the years, and Brian and Paul, as much as they try, it would be nice to have that person to bounce stuff off and review for us. It would actually help reduce costs of some of the consulting that we go out for. We could have having an in-house municipal engineer, multidisciplined, not necessarily a sewer person or roads person or a drainage person, but somebody that has been around the block that has a little bit of everything that would really help us. The previous engineer had that, and it was very useful to have. This person would be also capable of infrastructure planning, asset planning, strategic planning, identifying safety projects and coordinating the works. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, what Ms. Campbell was putting forward with the issue of revising our fees, et cetera, with our bylaws that we have, our fee bylaws, if they were all bumped up since their inception, we could probably, or we would be able to cover a significant portion of the cost of the engineer. So that's part of the engineering department. Parks and Environment Services, we have 3 full-time staff members. We have Laura Byrne, who is our head of planning. We have Jessica
Hooper.
Sorry?
Hooper.
Jeez. Laura Hooper, who is our head of. We have Jessica Boquist, who's our lead hand, and we have Angela Sinclair, who is Parks Labor, and we also have 3, lack of better terminology, 3 full-time auxiliary workers that come on in the summertime. The subdivision component of it, we are busy, as Ms. Gray said, that there was 178 new folios created this year, predominantly from the subdivision activity, whether they were building stratas or bare land stratas or fee simple subdivisions. There are 2 employees currently with the subdivision activity, and that's myself as the approving officer, and Nikki Lures, who is the deputy approving officer and also the land development technician. We are also in the mode of supporting the building department, as well as liaisoning and coordinating a lot of our work with Ms. Campbell through the planning department. So it takes a lot of time there, and we are busy there. We're working through it. The other part of the component of the development services is something that I really have gotten into in the last little bit, is the wastewater treatment plant and the collection system. Unfortunately, with the departure of Dan Skidmore, our manager responsible for the plant, a little bit more has fallen on me, and I'm learning more about sewer than I ever wanted to learn. But it's coming around. We actually have his position posted, along with a further operator 2 to augment the services down there. We have, right now at the plant, we only have 2 employees. We have an operator 4 and an operator 3. If one of those person has an incident or gets sick, we're in trouble. We can't legally operate that plant with 1 employee. So hopefully early next week we will be interviewing for the further operator 2, and the manager. As I said, we have a couple of applications that we hope to be interviewing as quickly as we can. I believe that posting is up on March 1st, I believe, so we'll be able to get a hold of that. So that's it for the basic overview for the development services. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the road improvement improvement program, or the resurfacing program, if you will. Sorry, I got the wrong one.
It's in the capital.
Oh,
in case you're looking for it, it's in the capital,
in the capital,
2019 capital budget. If you're, yeah.
You got it? Sorry. In
page 8.
Okay, given the this is a follow up from 2018. In 2017, we had a contractor go out and assess all the pavement on all our roads. And from that assessment, it established an $700,000 a year program, I should say, for the next 5 years, starting in 2018, to resurface roads based on condition and based on proximity. And I'll just quickly flash through. I put up all I put up all the years just to give you an indication. I'll go back one. So there was 2018. Give you an indication of where all the roads were. Shoot, sorry about that. And So these are all based on a payment condition report that was done by Opus back in 2017. And as we move forward, you can see it. We tried to take the roads that were in the worst conditions and in the same area so we get the bigger bang for our buck. Last year we were able to do the works prescribed for 2018. We had a little bit of funding left over, so we were able to add on a few more roads for resurfacing at that time, so that worked out quite well. With any luck, we should be able to do the same this year. So there's 2019. As you can see, it's all in the Pyrite Maple North area, French Road area. 2020, Grant Road, the other side of Pyrite, etc. I don't think I need to go through them all. I think you've got basically the general idea here.
Yeah, just be helpful for us to have the PowerPoint emailed to us later.
Yeah, I could do that. Just at the end here, at the end of the PowerPoint is actually a plan that shows the distribution in the years for the road improvements. I think you'll find that handy, but we can get that to you quickly. So,
just a couple of questions before you move on. I thought Charters Road was going to be done this year.
Charters Road, we had to, and I'll have to get back into the records, but we had to, maybe you can, we had to manipulate some of the money for some of the studies that we were doing.
I believe the issue with Charters Road was we were going to fund it with DCC money,
okay.
but it's not a DCC road. There was a Charters Road and another road, I can't recall.
Yeah,
they're not DCC roads, so we can't use that reserve fund. So this is open for discussion of if we want to do these, where are we going to get the money to do them? Because we can't use the funds that initially were thought. It's a prior council, I'm not sure the history.
Yeah,
right.
Sorry, it was originally thought that Charters Road was a DCC road, and it isn't. And about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, we had a budget for design work. But last year, we took that money from the design work and put it towards, I believe it was a transportation master plan. And so that money has been depleted out of that. So through the transportation master plan, we hope to reestablish what DCC roads will be in the district. And I highly think that Charters Road, just given what it serves, would be a DCC road.
Yeah. So just for our newly elected, and maybe staff can correct me if I'm wrong here, is a DCC road, development cost charges, so a road that is impacted by development. So maybe once upon a time, there's only one new development project on Charters. Otherwise, the residents have been as they are for a very long time, so perhaps that's why it was not designated as a road. But now, as you may know, like, it is the way that everybody goes to the schools. It's the most direct way to get there. So all the new development is impacting this road, and as you drive on it, like, it's really starting to crumble and fall apart. So yes, there's a new townhouse project on it, but they are not responsible for all of that wear and tear. There will be the whatever amount of houses, and hopefully those people that choose to live there will then walk or find other means to access the schools. There's great proximity for that. But everybody else in the community, I don't see that the buses go that way. I don't know that they do, if school buses do, but certainly everybody driving goes that way to get to the schools. And then I guess we do have the CRD has announced their housing project that'll potentially come onto that road. So I think it's the case of, but yeah, I guess now that the transportation plan, I just, with the snow and the ice, I can see Charters crumbling apart completely if we don't take some proactive steps there, because it's just breaking up all over the place. Even on Highway 14 now, you can see how it's really starting to crumble there. So it is something, but I guess at this point, the transportation plan will conclude and come to us, and then once we receive that, then that would be the impetus to update the DCC bylaw. Would that be the right approach? Okay, so perhaps then once we work our way through that, then maybe next year's budget 2020, that would be nice to maybe look at allocating development cost charges to that road, or to start that design work or something, I think, because otherwise that's a critical cutoff to the schools. And also now we have a golf course that everyone's using, right? Again, which is exciting. And ball fields and stuff, skate park, other stuff. Go ahead.
Just a couple of things. One of them was actually expressing appreciation for holding a mighty large bag, given the lack of a municipal engineer and someone to handle a wastewater plant. So thanks so much for that. The other one was, I was just curious, this is either for either one of you really. I was looking at the relevant or theoretically relevant page 8, and the only thing I find on page 8, and I could be misinterpreting, is the 5-year road plan at $800,000. That's the $700,000, but it's not. There's just a discrepancy, so I'm curious about that.
Yes, initially it was $700,000, and then for Brian, he's basically like, I'll spend as much as you can give me and fix the roads. So there was just a little miscommunication between Rob's slide and my slide. So this will be an adjustment we can make and bump it back down to $700,000. It just, in the timing, this was already produced, so we didn't want to change the numbers after the fact and give Jen another heart attack. So,
but it is $700,000.
It is $700,000. So
what's in here.
Yes. So. Yes, so they'll be anticipating after these meetings, we'll be revising this on a regular basis until we get to the final number. So that's one of the adjustments we'll be doing.
Okay. Councillor McMath and Bateman?
Yeah, $800,000 for road work is like nothing, but one bus stop. I just wanted to know, maybe I just haven't seen it, is the road improvement program available online? Like you have that beautiful chart and the map.
It's not on our website, it's not online, but I do have it in PDF if you would like a copy of it.
Just the more things that we can put online will just reduce so many phone calls and so many questions for you and for me and for everybody. So it's tricky because you have to balance what you share to an extent, but the more that's available online, that's going to, like almost every topic, like how the tax increase, the more we can communicate with the public and show them what we're doing, because that's, I think, where a lot of frustration comes from, is like everyone is short-staffed and everyone is working really hard, so it takes more work to communicate. So there's this gap in communication. So the community has no idea all the things that you guys are doing, but you don't have enough time to share what those things are. So just if you can put these things online, or not you per se, but if they go online, that will reduce a lot of the frustration or just the frustration.
Through your worship, I can check with corporate services to find out whether there's a place to park it on our website. I'm not sure myself, so I will check into it.
Just to confirm it, I know it's not the whole plan, but the PowerPoints will be loaded to our website later today or tomorrow. All the PowerPoint presentations will be loaded and form part of the package of the 5-year financial plan that's currently on our website. So this information at least will be up there for people to see.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, I would concur with Councillor McMath. It's good to know that in 2021, my road, Briarwood, will get a resurfacing, and the people on Country Road in 2022, for example. So that's good information to have out there. And I had another question around the philosophical reasons we began this 5-year road improvement program, because as early days of trying to track council's business and looking at 5-year financial plans, always used to highlight the connector road, Throop and Church Road improvements and all of that. And then all of a sudden, this 5-year program came into play a couple of years ago. Could you give me the background on why that switch happened away from the connector road?
I don't know if I can really respond to why we got away from the connector road, other than when prior to my arrival, my understanding is the connector road, being the Throop Road to Phillips Road, there was a grant available and the grant was awarded, and council of the day decided not to proceed with the connection. That's my understanding. The road maintenance program, as you see today, was predicated on the fact that we have a very aging infrastructure for our road, and it was a matter of getting on it before we lose the roads in their entirety. And it was presented to council after we received the OPUS report with the pavement conditions and what we would need to go forward. And it was established at that time that we would get X amount of money, which equated to $700,000 a year to go forward with the maintenance.
Okay.
Just if I may, my understanding is that with the connector road, now this is going back some time, there was the referendum that didn't pass. So the provincial funding and everything was lost as a result of. And then it was the case where Wadhams, a condition of that, there was that whole property was once one big lot, and then a condition of subdivision was that developer, whoever on Covenant, was to build out a section of that road. Council of the day decided to build the road themselves with whatever funding, I guess, from reserves or something instead of. And then the through to Phillips was a grant, had a grant applied for. There was an award for a multi-purpose trail that council did get, but then chose to do the multi-purpose trail along Wadhams instead of the Phillips connection. But I think the grant was not, the actual road construction was not successful. So it's always sat there. So I guess in my wearing my advocacy hat, I've said to the province, like, this connection here is to alleviate the congestion on Highway 14 and people coming through the Circle Road. So I think you should pay for that connector road, and perhaps we can pay for multi-purpose, and we will do the trail connection pieces, but you should actually fund the road. If this is for your highway, why are we paying for your highway? If it's to help offset congestion. The province should pay for that, even though it connects through our town, and we will pay for trail and lighting improvements. So that's sort of where I have last left that conversation. So it's still sort of there, but I also think if it's to alleviate highway, then why are we paying for it? Yes, it helps move traffic through our town, but then it comes down to our infrastructure that is falling apart. So part of my question now is, and this is sort of my concern, is that I think we need to look at what is our asset management policy. So every road we build will need to be replaced. So Wadhams Way is our newest road. What is our plan to replace it? Because it will also fall apart eventually, just like all of the other roads. So at some point, I think we need to set a policy that X goes into replacing our assets. Because, and I don't know where we're at, but it kind of freaks me out, because everything that we have will fall apart. It's like your house. The roof, like, things are going to crumble and fall apart. So what are we saving for? Or is there nothing, in which case, you know, it's going back to the taxpayer. I'd rather look, I know that Qualicum and some others have a policy where they put, you know, a small percentage into asset management for saving for the future so that it'll alleviate the tax hit. And I think we need to look at that, maybe not in this budget cycle, but in future years, because $700,000, like, when we do charters, it's going to be more than $700,000, I think, for that whole thing. And this is our staff now taking a very diligent, creative approach over 5 years, you know, but at some point, all of these roads are going to have, and then what? There's going to be another long list of another 5-10 years, and then we'll have to start the whole program all over again. And is it always going to be this incremental approach? Do we try to position ourselves and say, you know what, we need to go to the province, we need to get X, and we want a grant, I don't know what criteria is, or do we borrow to just fix it all, and then, I don't know. So that's sort of that thought is, but it is something that keeps me up at night. Like, everything's starting to crumble. I'm worried.
And Your Worship, I think, I know the district is working on some asset management. There's a asset management training. There's a well-regarded program that people have been taking and becoming trained on. And you don't see it in this budget cycle, but it might be something worth considering for council as the cycles proceed and more funding has been available for different programs, that an asset management coordinator or planner, or I'm not sure what the term would be, but someone who would be in charge of that that particular function as much as you do with parks and engineering, ahead of asset management, would be there to coordinate all those programs, because realistically your roads are going to crumble. And the more reserve funds you have, then the less we dip into our reserve funds at this time, and the more reserves we have stacked away, enables us to renew those resources and those assets as they inevitably will begin to decay and need to be replaced or maintained. So that's a position that you might not want to fund, that you're probably not going to fund this year, given that there are other higher priorities. But going down the road, it would certainly be something that I'm going to leave with the incoming CAO as a suggestion.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had is, what about line painting? Is that in here?
Yes, Your Worship. We have, it's in the maintenance part. In the maintenance part of the budget, we have some money for line painting, and I believe there was going to be some. Sorry. Page 17. And I believe.
There it is.
And I believe last year there was some coordination with our staff and staff from Colwood or Machosen with regards to procuring a contract for long line painting for both, because a lot of the stuff that we ask for in the way of those kind of services that some of the companies don't really want to come out here because it's not big enough. But if we could latch on to another municipality, and I believe it was Brian Derrick that was initiating that, so hopefully that'll still be a program that we can go through. Picking up on the asset and the deterioration of our assets globally, I mean, we got, sewer, it's going to start to, it's getting to that age where we're already showing that the deficiencies and the upgrades that are required. But I think through the strategic planning, we'll have to drill down into yearly asset funding, if you will, where we may have to borrow or whatever, get creative financing and put aside X amount of money per year just for upgrades. I know in the major municipalities up and down the island, that's what they've been doing for years, and it's something that we need to do. But there's never been an appetite for that kind of budget before. So, just as we move forward,
there was a practice where if there was surplus, it would go into reserves, and then it was the case where surplus was then used to bring down the taxes in the current year. But the downside to doing that is if there's no surplus, then it's a greater hit, right? So it's sort of false, not false, it's one way of looking at it, but long-term it's false. Long-term, because if it was, say it was supposed to be $10 and then you had savings and you reduced it in half to 5, well, it should have always have been 10. 10 increasing to 11 is better 5 to 11, right?
I think that's what I think the new council is dealing with. The things that have been put off in the past are coming back to haunt us now. And I'd much rather not be looking 10 years from now and saying these are things that we should look at now.
Yeah.
Rather than somebody pay the piper. We're going to have to pay sooner or later, and we have to work it into the system.
It all needs to be fixed, and if we don't start a proactive approach to it now, we're kicking it to the next generation, and that's not the legacy, or like the next council or the one after that. That's not the legacy that I want to leave them. It's more the case, look, we're starting to build up some savings. We want you to encourage these savings. Those savings are going to need to replace what our community depends on to get around and to live. Councillor St. Pierre.
I have a number of thoughts. One of them is because of the weather we've been having, and I entirely agree. I think what we're looking at here is a stitch in time. And we missed a lot of stitches in the last decade, and now we're going to pay the 9. But now we need to actually look at what are the stitch in times we can provide at the same time as the 9, because otherwise in 10 more years, the problem's going to come back and bite us. Now, one of the things that comes up for me with this is simply I grew up in Quebec, and I remember cracks forming. And we didn't have as much rain as we have here in BC. But those cracks would still increase and destroy a road pretty quick. Any small pothole would turn into something that would lose a car. And what I'm thinking here is we've got $700,000, which is not a huge amount, especially when we're looking at resurfacing, and it's only for certain roads. During this last winter, we're going to have a large number of roads with potholes and cracks. And I do think that we need to, and it's quite likely the engineering department already has this fully under control, but if it's not the case, and if there's budgeting needed for a stitch in time to keep all of those potholes from exploding and caulk those cracks and make sure that those roads aren't destroyed in record time, we need to do that. And we need to find the budget for that stitch in time. The other thing that I was curious about was you mentioned the advocacy with Ministry of Transportation. I was wondering how receptive they were to that kind of advocacy, because I guess from my point of view as a newbie councillor, I don't actually see the ministries as being approachable at all, but I'm wondering about that.
So the relationship has changed. I wasn't always successful in advocacy. Sometimes it's just letters. Now it's just changed because I think the government is listening to local government, and it's also, of course, who our MLA is, and there's been a very good dialogue. So most of the conversations I have had is with some of the ministry staff, and they note it, and so we'll wait. I think it's the case of when they finalize what they are going to do with Highway 14, because it's all expanded, initially they did a corridor study, but it was a very small period, a small section from the 4 lanes to Phillips Road. When our MLA became the premier, he expanded it from Langford to Port Renfrew. And now they are looking at the South Island, and they're hearing the push about from all the mayors saying, we really want the ENN Trail to be a viable solution. We want you to work on that. So we've added more to that, and then they've done some consultation. They're doing more in this area right now. But I think it's the case is I'm just patiently waiting for them to do their work, and then it'll be like, okay, so, but at the same time also just looking ahead to, and part of it is once we have our transportation master plan, I want to go with something current and say, look, this, but the staff have asked me is like, what about this connector thing? Is that still live to you? Yes, it is. It's just you need to pay for it, not us. Because I don't need to repeat my rant there, but now I think when our master plan is completed, that'll be the time, or at least in a draft form, to be like, look, this is where we're at. We're doing this to help move traffic through our area, whether it's like in all these different modes, I'm hoping, with parks and trails and transportation. We really now need you to come to the plate and to do this part here. And perhaps we're seeing, and parts of what I've noticed just through getting through town, following the trail section is a lot easier than going by the roads. Like, it's just an easier way to cut through town, and that's where our staff have been working on those trail connections. I just want to take them something more current than our old 10-year-old plan now and say, yes, this is relevant, because all the data has changed, our growth rate, everything. So they are, I think they're listening and absorbing, but I want to hit them with impactful data that is relevant and current.
Through your worship to our CAO. When we were at the LGLA, we heard, I believe, Mirja Voort, or basically the financial officer, and I forget which municipality, but she has some really interesting things to say about surpluses and what to do with surpluses in terms of, and I don't remember the details, but I'm really reasonably sure that Mr. Schaefer does, and I was hoping you might share that.
Actually, not so much. I took some notes, but I can certainly call Miriam and ask her, or Maria rather, and ask her for a copy of her PowerPoint, because she did have some. I remember she did have some excellent ideas, and I think they're in my binder downstairs.
Well, I can provide some high-level guesstimates as to what she said, okay? But the most basic thing was that all departments were encouraged to create surpluses because not only would they not be lost by the departments, they would go into reserves that would then be accessible for the wish list projects, which were not put on the budget, but they were essentially under the budget. This encouraged frugality on the part of all departments without actually expecting loss of income. Coming under budget was not a reason to have your budget necessarily reduced because everyone actually benefits from the process. I don't know any of the other details, but it certainly sounded like a really excellent way of dealing with those surpluses because it encourages surpluses while actually maintaining them. And I thought it might be interesting to look at that sort of a process or something similar.
And again, Your Worship, I think when we look at budgetary surpluses within specific departments, we have to be careful that we're not generating revenues that are not specifically directed towards providing a service. So we can only levy fees, charges for that are equivalent to the cost of providing the service. As well, I think that's a great idea. Philosophically, I'm not entirely sure that I'm on board with padding my budget so that I have some extra money to spend next year. this year. You see what I mean? It kind of runs against the grain. I would like to ask for the money that I actually need, and if I end up with a surplus because something doesn't get done, then I'm okay with that. I know that's not where you were going, but I think in terms of public perception, Rachel did all the work, and I'm not, but I really was firm on putting together a budget that didn't have any fat in it, so that we could bring it to you, and it was what it was. And so you can rest assured that nobody's budgeted any surpluses in their departments at this point.
Okay.
Just a quick point on surpluses. Similar to what he's saying, and I definitely was going to connect with that lady as well, just to kind of confirm other things she was talking about. Is I think if you're referring to not so much padding the budget surpluses, but just due to whatever circumstances, there's extra funds at the end of the year. And I think that's something that doing more detailed, regular department reporting will identify a lot sooner, so then we can identify what do we want to, is there something this year we want to use that money for? Is there something in a future year where we could maybe use that for? And then make these decisions a lot sooner, so it'll be a lot easier to know what we have and what we can do with it. Just as a high level, as Maya touched on, as far as our operating surplus, ideally we should have 6 months of our property tax revenue sitting in our operating surplus. So, which would mean roughly $4 million based on this year's numbers, last year's numbers. We're sitting at $1.6 million. So that's showing that we've been using operating surplus over the years to fund a lot of ongoing projects, when really they should be used, if anything, it should be used as a last resort and used for one-time projects, whereas I think this has been used for, we have capital projects coming out of this fund. So it's not an ideal situation. It's not something that, that's how you shouldn't be using your surplus or to balance your budget. So I think regular reporting will help identify departments' overages a lot sooner, so then we can make proactive decisions on how to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just 2 other points. I'm glad that you've brought forward the municipal engineer. I look forward to somebody joining our team in that way and providing that guidance and having that expertise in-house. We sometimes contract out, but then we're subject to contractor availability, and we don't necessarily have that intelligence all. I mean, yes, they finish their work, but you could hire somebody to do one thing, and while they're out in the field, they notice this, right? So if that was our particular person, it would be like, okay, I was down here doing this, and now I've noticed that, and then they'll bring all of that intelligence sort of back, and then it's ours. And then also I think it's important to us as a council, just from what I've seen in chambers before, when our engineer is being challenged by a developer to do X, they are working on behalf of the district's best interest. And sometimes developers don't like that because they're looking for another avenue. So it would be up to them to hire their own engineer to then say, well, I disagree with your engineer for this, and is there an engineering way to work that out? Maybe there's 2 different ways to do something, but in this case, this person is like all of our staff is representing the district's best interest, not the developer. I mean, we work with developers, but there are times where they don't want to do something, and then we hear later about such and such water flooding something's property, or this wasn't done right, or that wasn't done right, and then we have to go to our taxpayers to remedy a problem that should have been resolved by said whoever, and then this way, but we need that first. So for all of the sort of the infrastructure pieces, from sewer to wastewater to trails to everything, we really need that intelligence. So I'm glad to see that is brought forward, and I completely support that position being created. And my second point, while you were in the budget, I was in asset management, and it was former Mayor of Golden, Christine Benty, that does a lot of workshops on asset management. That's her passion. So that's where she had shared that because, and it's a good argument when people say, oh, well, I don't want to pay, while the future generation can figure it out in terms of infrastructure. Well, they haven't actually paid for what we already have here now today. So there was a calculation roughly that every man, woman, and child in Canada has a debt of at least $9,000 towards infrastructure. So I have the calculation in another piece of paper, but it's the case of if a child were born today, they owe already $9,000 towards aged old infrastructure. And is that really, and that is growing. That doesn't take CPI into effect. It doesn't take climate action into effect. It doesn't take any of that. But is that really what we want that number to keep growing down the road? So the present hasn't paid for the past, you know, if that makes sense, right? Because there is an infrastructure debt. So when that argument comes, well, well, you haven't paid for what we have here now. And this is why we have this big problem looming. And it's not an easy or sassy one to fix, but it has to be. Councillor Beddoes.
I just had a quick question. We talked about engineering services and contracting out. Do you have any idea what we've paid out in the last year for contracting engineering services? Just a rough ballpark figure.
Through your worship, just for the sewer plant alone was around $100,000.
Okay, well, that speaks volumes to me, because if we had a resident engineer, I understand there would be some work will spill over, but it almost pays for itself. So, okay, thanks. That's a good point.
Okay, anything? Thank you, Councillor Beddoes. Okay, back to Mr. Howitt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just getting back to the overview, I mentioned that I was just going to do the high-level stuff right now, not get into the weeds of the maintenance program, et cetera, at this point in time. So the next one I have is the sanitary sewer, the critical parks inventory. We need this inventory. It allows our operators, when pieces of equipment fail, et cetera, that we have stuff that's shelf ready and it can be fixed immediately without waiting for something to come in. So that's part of the sewer budget. And with these critical parts, I hate to use the pun, but the operators can do their business, so the Sooke residents can do their business. Okay. The centrifuge replacement. The centrifuge biosolids related components have been estimated at $750,000. This project exists in the 2018 to the 2022 five-year financial plan. On December the 10th, 2018, Council approved the expenditure of $120,000 to have Stantec Engineering to design and project manage the biosolids project. At this point, the District of Sooke has posted on Bid BC a request for qualifications for the centrifuge biosolids work. That closes on March 1st, I believe, and the reason for pre-qualifications is so we could get good quality tenders when we go out, so we can get somebody who is, they have to prove qualifications, and I can't remember the detail, but they have to have like 20 years experience in municipal wastewater experience to supply and continually monitor and service the equipment, so that's why that was done. Once we get the pre-qualification, Stantec Engineering and ourselves, we'll go through it and make sure we're satisfied, and then we'll go back to tender with regards to the pre-qualified companies that have put in the work. With this money, it was also with this project, it was also identified at the December 10th, 2018 council meeting that the $750,000 will require some debt financing, and unfortunately, I can't answer those questions. So if you have questions with regards to debt financing, Ms. Gray would be able to answer that question. But that's part of it as we move forward. We need to do this. Our centrifuge is old. It's starting to not work well. Yesterday we had a shutdown for a little while. It was a little scary, but our operators got it up and running again, so we're getting on it as quickly as we can.
The centrifuge spins out the water, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the benefit to the water being spun out is then the sludge doesn't have as much weight because we pay disposal based on weight. So if there's less water, then it'll be not as heavy, so there'll be a saving in that regard as well, right? In theory. But doesn't this also have to be replaced at a certain time of the year?
Your Worship, we have been talking about that, and we figure that late fall into early winter would be the best time to do it. Certainly not like December, January, February would not be a good time. But that's a matter of the engineers trying to figure out the best time for that.
Okay. Questions, Councillor McMath, Beddoes, and St. Pierre?
And just, if memory serves, we went on our field trip to the treatment center. The old one will still be kept on site to be used as a backup if the new one fails.
Yes, that's correct. We hope to be able to, when the old centrifuge comes out, and the operators will have time to take it apart and see if they can refurbish it, and it can be parked somewhere. But we can't do that right now because you can't shut down the centrifuge to work on it properly like that. So
yeah, of course.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Beddoes?
I was just going to say, just reflecting back to our tour, how valuable that tour was. Because in the part you're talking about now, I know what you're talking about. And I understand the importance of getting the new one. So just kudos to the staff for arranging those tours. It makes our life a lot easier.
Thanks very much for that. And your tour guide, Chris Miller, he lives, breathes, and dies for that place. So.
Yeah, breathes especially. Yeah.
Councillor St. Pierre?
Just two quick questions. One was the return on investment on the new centrifuge. My understanding was that because of cartage fees, this thing would pay for itself within a year, I believe.
It will eventually pay for itself just by dewatering enough where the weight going to Heartland Dump is reduced significantly. I don't have the numbers with me, but I can certainly get them to you if you wish.
I was trying to recall from our tour, but
I don't have that kind of retention, so I'm sorry about that. So.
Okay.
Councillor Bateman. Welcome, Councillor Parkinson.
Yeah. In pink. Bullying. No bullying today. Okay. I was trying to find the centrifuge here in the document. I don't see it in the capital plan. And I was wondering whether it was in the sewer fund, but not there. Got to be here somewhere.
Yes, the details aren't included in the capital plan. It's included on page 24 in the total
24.
sewer capital cost of $1.13 million for this year. So it's included in the $890,000 number. So that's Rob's just going through more of the details of each of those numbers, but we don't.
All right.
Haven't provided the.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Carry on.
The next one, Your Worship, is our continuation on the stormwater ground and infiltration program. For this year, 2019, as you're well aware, maybe for the new council members, we have an issue with some of our older infrastructure areas where the manholes are actually being inundated with storm water, not sewer. And it's creating during the heavy rains or hours after the heavy rains, is creating a surge at our plant and creating a need to go into panic mode and actually decant the water sooner than we want. We want to get a handle on this, and once we get the handle on where the worst INI is coming from, and we've got 2 manholes being totally replaced as of this coming Monday and the following Monday, and then we've got about another 4 that we will be either replacing or repairing, and we think from that we're going to get a fairly good handle on the INI. We still have some work to do. Once we think that we have the INI under control, then we would do specific flow monitoring at the plant to ensure what our capacity is. Right now, it's a bit of a guessing game. We're about 67% in the plant and about 65% in the collection system. But once this is done and we do the flow monitoring, then we'll have it fairly accurate. So that's what this money is for. In your package, as I said, I wasn't going to get into the weeds of this unless you really wanted me to, but it's just other expenditures that we have coming up in the next year. Oops. So, if you want to think about that and have questions, But I'd like to just hit the other couple of major items. One is if I can get away from sewer for a minute, is our road maintenance program, or our road maintenance contract, I should say. It's up in October. I have been canvassing some of the industry people, and best guess estimate is we would be looking at about $350,000 a year in the new maintenance contract, as long as we do not go too far from the maintenance regime that we have in the existing contract. So this is what I'm bringing forward, is $350,000. I'm also in the consulting part of the budget asking for, I think it was $40,000, because we're going to need a consultant to help us with the tender on this one. So.
Okay, Councillor Bateman?
And that's with Main Road, is that?
Main Road has the existing contract. Excuse me, through your worship. Main Road has the existing contract, and we will have to go out to tender.
They're of course, the king of the heap, but there's some other companies out there.
There are other companies on the island. There's Victoria Highway Maintenance is one. It's the only one I can think off the top of my head. But the way Main Road is set up, I kind of suspect that they would be like in the running when the tender goes out. That's for sure.
Councillor Beddoes?
You touched on a consultant. Can you explain that a bit more, exactly what that's for?
Yeah, as I said, we're going to have to go to tender for our highways maintenance contract. We don't have the expertise in-house to do that.
Okay.
So I want to hire a consultant to put it together for us.
And you said 40 in here, it says 60?
I budgeted 40 total, I believe, for consulting.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is the number on page 17 for those
That's
of you
what I'm
referring to the
actually.
pages.
Yeah, sure.
So yes, the 60,000 is 50,000 for the consultant.
Okay.
And there's 10,000 that we're not quite sure why, was living in the community parks budget
just
before.
Just so the difference, yeah.
Yeah, there was a $10,000 for a library survey, and it was sitting in the parks budget before, so we've just moved that and combined the numbers up to engineering, because I'm not quite clear why it was a parks.
So this is like,
priority.
how long is the contract for when we go back? Is it a 5-year contract we do for road maintenance?
The original contract was for 5 years, and it was renewed twice.
Okay. The reason being is that the consultant is just a one-time for this year, and then for the next 4 years, if we go for a 5-year contract, it's not in there.
No, there's no consulting. He's just putting the contract, or excuse me, the consultant would just be putting together the tender to go out. Once the tender is out, it's out.
Sure.
The
So
consultant.
this is a 1-year cost.
Yes,
and
that's correct.
taxes won't be as high next year.
Okay. Carry on.
The last one I had was the sidewalk program that we're entering into an agreement with the MOT. As I brought forward in a previous council, or excuse me, as I brought forward in a previous report, the ministry has asked us to share in the sidewalk program for Highway 14, or West Coast Highway, from Otter Point Road to Brooks Road. They have a total budget of $1 million. What they are wanting us to do is contribute $100,000 towards design, which is a third of the cost of the design. They'll pick up the other $200,000. They will build the sidewalks from Otter Point Road to Ed McGregor Park on both sides of the highway, and then they will design based on that all the way out to Brooks. And then our only other cost would be when we decide in budget process when we wanted to go and build the further sidewalk, whatever side they choose in the future, because they haven't decided what side of the highway the sidewalk would actually be on from Ed McGregor out to Brooks Road. I suspect it would be on the north side, but they'll have to deal with that through the engineering. So we have $100,000, which I brought forward originally in a report last year, and we just want to add this into the budget for this year.
Crosswalks at McGregor, for example, from the Hope Center across, or from Gatewood across. Is that part of the thinking?
Through your worship, when we were walking the highway with the MOT people, we were talking about crosswalks, and crosswalks will be determined based on the highway speed at the location, pedestrian access or pedestrian need, and whatever side of the highway they choose to put the sidewalk on. So all that would be part and parcel of the engineering.
Other questions? Okay, moving along.
Your worship, that's it for me with regards to the presentation. As I said, if anybody has any questions with regards to the maintenance portion of it or any of the other capital, but I do have Jessica Bolquist and Paul Butterfield here to talk about some of the other projects related to engineering and parks. So I think that at this point it would be a good send-off for me and bring those two in. So.
Okay, and seeing no members of the public, I will carry over to Ms. Bolquist. Thank you. Do we need a bit of a health break, or can we, Ms. Bolquist, are you okay just for a bit of a health break? Okay, just take a short recess. We can see this one.
Even with my new glasses, I have a tough time.
I can't read that. Okay, are we ready to resume, please? Thank you. And welcome, Ms. Boquist and Mr. Butterfield. Okay, we're getting started, councillors.
Okay, good afternoon. Paul and I are going to present the Parks and Services portion of the budget. Paul project manages a number of our projects, so he's going to speak to those pieces in particular. Earlier, Rob mentioned our team, but I thought I would throw a picture up there. I actually thought we would have lots more members of the public here this evening or this afternoon, so a lot of my slides were there for the background information benefit of the public. But there's our crew. Laura, our head of Parks and Environmental Services, Angela and I are the 2 full-time staff working in operations, and then we have 3 2/3-time, so 0.66 laborers. They work 8 months of the year. In terms of an overview of what we do, it's really extensive. We do everything from the maintenance of our 116 parks and 17 kilometers of trail to filling every dog bag dispenser in between. It's really extensive, and since the Parks Department came in-house in 2017, we have taken on 32 new assets. So that's a significant amount of work that's come in-house since we've become a Parks Department. This year in 2019, we're poised to take on 4 to 7 new assets, depending on final acceptance certificates, and some of those are large parks that are going to be a lot of work to maintain. So we're definitely expanding and growing, and the extent and the scope of what we're doing is constantly expanding. So the projects that we want to work on this year, the first one is the Kiltassan Billings Park. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that park. If you've been down there, it's a lovely little park on the west side of Billings Spit. It has nice trees covered in ivy and potholes that could easily sink a smart car. It's an incredible ocean access. It's a beautiful little park, or it has the potential to be a beautiful little park, but it's poorly organized and there's no parking and no signage. There's a natural existing location to launch canoes, kayaks, paddleboards. I personally use it all the time. In the fall, when the salmon are running, fly fishermen flock to this area and choke the streets with their vehicles to do fly fishing in the estuary. It's an incredible park, and it needs an upgrade desperately. It will provide fantastic access to the water and alleviate that pressure on that neighborhood for parking. So we're looking for $35,000 to basically create some parking, angle parking along the street, and to improve the flow of traffic and improve the potholes within the park. I don't know if you guys have any questions about that park. Just keep going. So the next piece is the Demamiel Creek Little River connector, and Paul is going to speak to that.
Yeah, so this is the Phase 1 grant application that I spoke to Council earlier about. Still yet to hear about the status of the grant. This is our $30,000, which relates to 25% of the total project costs of the Phase 1. And as you can see, that the diagram shows the Ponds Park corridor in the bottom left, and running along the school street from both the high school and the elementary beyond, and terminating about the top 1/3 of that diagram. This is the multi-use trail that we're hoping to have, and then at the northern extent of this would be the start of year 2 that would actually cross the creek in the following year. The park washrooms. and fountains. So part of the resolution last year was to install a park washroom at the John Phillips Memorial Park, as well as Whiffen Spit. In the 2018 funds, we were able to fund the John Phillips Memorial Park washroom, which is on order and will arrive sometime this spring. At these amount of funds, the $105,000 is to install a washroom at Whiffen Spit, and then add a water line to both of these locations with this water fountain, which was selected by council, which is quite unique. It's a very expensive fountain, but it offers a lot of sustainability and enhancements that promote water bottle use and pet water use as well as human.
Okay. So next, this is a carryover from 2018, but just wanted to let you know that this is a project currently underway. A wooden staircase is being built at Cairns Park off of Water Street, which is going to create another access point to the ocean. And that work should start in the next week or two. The next piece is one that Brenda could probably speak better to. It's actually from a 2018 resolution and will be funded via the SUIT program for the Arts Reserve Fund. And it's to build the Whiffen Spit Memorial Wall, which is proposed to be a standalone memorial sculpture, and it will accommodate up to 250 brass plaques that will help to be an alternative to the bench donation program. So right now we have a lot of requests for bench donations, and they're outnumbering the number of benches that we can install. So by installing this memorial area, we'll have other options of places for people to put plaques for their loved ones. And it's proposed to be right near the entrance of the trailhead. That's just behind the sign in the parking lot. The last one is the big one, and it's the bluff staircase. The bluff staircase is at the end of Austin's Place, if you've been down there. That staircase was built in the mid-1990s by the developer. It's now almost 30 years old, and it's in really bad shape. Last year, we actually had a failure of a couple of treads and had to close it temporarily while it got repaired. In inspecting the staircase, the damage to it, the deterioration of the boards is really extensive, and it's been recommended that it be replaced. It's 100 steps, so it's huge, and it's in a very technical, steep location, so it's going to be a difficult build. And but it's an important one. It's a really important linkage down to the beach. That is used by surfers and boot camps, not just the neighborhood. It's lots of community members are using it for other purposes. So that's a really important one. And if we're not able to do that soon, we just recently had another railing come off. We've repaired it, but it's really becoming a safety issue. So if we're not able to replace it, we'll have to look at closing it down until we can, basically, unfortunately.
Okay, there's just a couple of questions. So, Councillor Beddoes, then McMath, then Parkinson, please. Then
I'm just a little confused with the figure. Is that plus a replacement, $150,000? That's not much money for that very, very large staircase, considering that other little staircase was $55,000.
We've crunched some numbers, and we took a staircase that looked to be a really affordable build, which was a Sun River Nature Trail staircase. And we looked at one that was quite expensive, which was Murray Road, and took the average, and it's $1,000 per step is what we've calculated to be the average. So $50,000 is basically a contingency and some funding for a geotechnical analysis.
Councillor McMath?
Interesting.
So with that, like $150,000 for that staircase, my only concern is that the parking that's there is not for public use. So as someone who tries to surf, there's nowhere to park, there's nowhere to go. So if we were to give $150,000 for that, is there any conversation being had about taking back over that parking space?
Not at this time, because it's a strata. It's not a conversation that I'm aware of.
So I just imagine that like the people that live there use that fairly frequently, so they have a vested interest with it.
Yeah.
I would really like to see a conversation come from that, because we're basically improving their area for them, but there are limitations for us based on the setup that they have right now. And then I just wanted to go back to Whiff and Spit.
The memorial area?
Pardon?
The memorial area?
No, one more before that with the water fountain.
Okay. Yeah.
It's just one water fountain that's going in?
One at each washroom, so one at the Whiff and Spit washroom and one at this washroom.
And how much are each of those water fountains?
They're about $8,000, and then you have to do delivery because they're not local.
And with vandalism, how durable are they?
I was going to say, a very similar model is in existence on Galloping Goose on Sioux River Road. And it seems to, every time I visit it when it's on in the winter, they have to get winterized. They're not on in the winter. But every time I go, it's in good working order.
Okay.
They seem very well made.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Parkinson? Microphone.
Microphone? Really?
Yeah. We're webcast, so.
Through your worship, then? So, for this one as well, so it is private, the parking area there. They have their signs up, and they will not allow people there. And they're not willing to turn over that area to the district. So there will be no way that we will get parking for that area. And everybody that goes down there parks all along the roadway by the post office box and down. So as long as that's okay, and I would think that the majority of the people living there are not going down there, those stairs to that park. They've been there forever, those people. And I live down the road from them, so anyhow, I'm just...
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor St. Pierre. Oh,
yeah, so the 150 is quite steep for a park that we're looking at if not everybody can use it.
Councillor St. Pierre.
A couple of things. One was that I was wondering if we could be looking at some cost recovery on the staircase. I had the notion that given that there's a lineup for memorial benches, we could have memorial steps. People would see them immediately. You could basically have people running up and noticing who the people who want to be remembered are.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
So it doesn't have to be included in the budget, but a cost recovery option might be possible.
Just if I may, we do have a memorial policy, so that is something that we would have to examine that policy in terms of eligibility and like. So just food for thought. There is a policy, and so before that would need to be amended first.
And the other thing that came up during our tour, which is relevant to structures failing this way, was the idea of having a part-time carpenter on call.
Yeah.
And, okay, that's still coming up, or?
That's not in our budget this year.
Have one.
Okay. In terms of the stitch in time thing, I would personally support that sort of thing, because when a roof fails because of a leak, when treads break and people hurt themselves, these things can be addressed fairly quickly by having a carpenter on call, and it could save the district thousands and thousands of dollars.
Councillor Bateman, then McMath.
So, so those two washrooms, are they going ahead this year? Whiff and Spit and John Phillips?
The John Phillips one was already paid for.
Right.
We paid for the deposit. We have funds to completely pay for that one from 2018 budget. This is the proposal to get the other one plus the fountains and water lines for this year.
Okay. Thank you for, as a zero waste suit representative, that was the fountain that we recommended, and it's dog, child, and adult, so kind of cool. And in terms of Bluffs Park, the staircase and the green space and viewpoints, that's also public property as well, right?
Yeah, there's two separate parcels. It's basically one park, but it's Eakin Park and Bluffs Park.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's parkland.
Yeah. And in terms of that strata parking, there's 6 spaces there, and I was just wondering whether we could perhaps approach the strata and could we have a couple for the public, because I know I used to take my mom down there, and she loved that, sitting on that bench and looking out, and that would make it a much... They'd still have 4 visitor parking, and then we'd have 2 for the public.
It's just worth making that, just approaching the strata, sending a letter saying, hey, we're, going to park in front of your residence otherwise. Just to have that conversation. They can say no, and that's fine, but...
We certainly used to.
Right.
That was only 5 or 6 years ago that they put in the no parking. Prior to that, we used to be able to go down there.
Yep, we can make that ask. Councillor McMath?
With this rebuild, what is the life expectancy?
Well, a wooden structure looks like they last about 25 to 30 years.
How long did this one last?
30 years.
Okay, so 30 years. What's looking at other material, what's the price difference for something that's going to last longer?
So we haven't actually priced that out. CRD and BC Parks is installing a lot more galvanized and aluminum stairs, but it's significantly more expensive. We just haven't priced it out, but we certainly could. But for a staircase of this size, I couldn't venture to estimate, but we can get back to you.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Just a couple other questions. So at one point we had contemplated doing like a whiff and spit park study. So is that, but I'm not seeing that in any of the future years. Is that rolling into the parks master plan now, or are we not?
So it was in the 2018 budget and ended up funding the Parks and Trails master plan. And in an effort to keep a really lean budget, we've proposed adding it to the 2020 budget. So not doing it this year, but doing it in 2020.
Okay, so maybe I just missed that. I just sort of didn't see it at all, but I think it's very important.
I thought it was there.
Well, I saw resurfacing.
So that's mislabeled. The resurfacing of 50,000, that's the value of having a study done.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. The
Okay.
resurfacing costs less than 10,000.
I see. Okay.
It's just been mislabeled.
Okay, because I would like, just when I sort of saw that, I thought, okay, well, I want to do the study before we actually throw that amount of money at resurfacing. So I'm glad that you've
We'll be
captured
getting
that.
the Parks and Trails master plan in the fall, so in a lot of respects it makes sense to wait for that document
Yeah.
to move forward with an analysis of the spit.
Okay. Going back to the Billings Spit staircase, is there some way that you can
Oh, sorry. Oh.
look at Kaltassin being Coltison, and finding and just checking in with Sauk Nation in terms of appropriate name place? In my conversations with the chief, it's the case of like putting in what the First Nation name is, and then underneath it we would still have Billings Park. But it's similar to how we're now, I always refer to Little River, otherwise known as Demomuel Creek.
Yeah.
So, if there's a way of checking in and then having the Quiltison language there, otherwise known as Kaltassin, and then the First Nations name for Billings Park there. And
as a point of information, we just, in our work with the Stickleback Trail Project, our wayfinding project through Soup with the Wanakika Trail Society, have purchased a font that I don't know how to pronounce.
Yes.
Sinoktin. So we'll be able to include Soup Nation place names with Sinoktin font.
Perfect.
On future signage and maps.
And then I did check in with their administrator, so any time that you want to connect, they had said just come on down and ask for their staff, and they'll give you whatever information you need on that. Great. So thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Parkinson.
We have 100. You said that we have 116 parks. I was wondering if we could get a list of the parks. And we used to have a map where they're all located. I was wondering if we could, as council, have a copy of that.
Sure.
And you said that How many parks did you say, or was it just parks that were brought in-house since we?
So since parks came in house, it's not necessarily all parks. It's 32 assets. So that could be the wastewater treatment plant, the lift stations, the roundabout, the medians.
So do you have a list of the 32?
I do. Yeah.
Perfect. I'd
I'll
like
give
to
you a
see that.
list.
That would be nice. And then I was just wondering if the memorial wall has been ordered yet. Because I had talked to Laura about that.
We
and
haven't.
were
The
looking at
RFQ
it.
hasn't gone out yet.
Okay.
So we're waiting for budget approval, and then that will happen.
Already approved it last term.
There was some discussion through finance. Maybe Rachel can speak to that.
Yeah, I believe, I can double check the details. This is Brent was more involved with it than I was, but there's some history with the budget that was approved and where it was supposed to come from and the budget where it is this year, which is why we were just including in the budget this year. The dollars are slightly different. So it's just a matter of how we're refunding the additional increase, I believe it was. I can confirm.
Right. So, yeah, and we had no idea of how much, it's stone that we're purchasing, right? So, understood that part of it would be coming from the arts and part of it would be coming from the parks, not the entire amount from the arts. Because we don't have that kind of money, sorry. And that's what was discussed previously. I still have all the minutes from that.
Okay, I'll have to look at the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Beddoes?
I'm good.
Okay, we're moving along. Okay.
I just wanted to highlight one thing, and just there was a bunch of projects, quite a few projects in here as Brenda's referencing last year's financial plan that were in 2019. But because we're undertaking the Parks and Trails Master Plan and the Transportation Master Plan, if these weren't started yet, they've kind of been put on hold because the assumption is the Parks and Trails Master Plans and the Transportation Master Plans may prioritize these in a different manner. So some of them have based on feedback from the staff that know more about it than I do, have been paused and are not included. If you're looking back to last year's and why they're gone, it's because the plans that are occurring may reprioritize where we would like to spend our money.
Tate? So the memorial wall is one that's going forward because that one was worked on and it has been started for over a year, and that was one of the priorities of the entire district, right?
Correct. That one's definitely still in there, yes.
Okay, anything else? Okay, carrying on.
Oh, I thought you guys had more stuff.
We can keep talking.
Thank you.
Yeah, arts and crafts is my favorite.
Okay.
I think that is all that we had no idea how long this was going to take. And if public was going to be here for questions and so on and so forth. So I think we've underestimated and maybe I'm going to take this as a good sign. We provided you with a lot of relevant information so you don't have as many questions on things. So I don't believe we had scheduled any more presentations for today. And so I don't know if there's any, pardon me? Oh, Paul has one more. Perfect.
Through your worship, and to Mayor and Council, this is our EV charger project. This is exciting because we really want to get this started. So we have a little bit of an ask to finish off our first spot on Eustis. We didn't quite have enough money in our 2018 funds, so we're looking for just a little top up this year so that we can get that one finished. In addition, we're looking at finishing off the two other locations that were designed for at the Ed McGregor Park and the Municipal Hall. And we need to throw up some wayfinding signage so that people throughout Sioux can understand where those three sites are. And it's all ministry standardized. Total cost of $75,000. No, that's just one component. The great thing about this is that just yesterday, I received notice of a grant application for level 2 chargers, which is really rare, that we will be applying for, that I'm working on right now. And I need to come back to council for a resolution, be coming on March 11th. And we'll be applying for this before the 27th, which is the deadline in March. That will cover 73.33% of the project costs. Yeah, 73.33%. Yeah. So if we don't get it, we're still going ahead with this amount of money to finish off the 6. If we get the grant application, we'll have much more expansion of scope possibility.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson, then St. Pierre.
How many chargers do we have?
So the total here will give us 6.
6. Do we one of these displays on?
So right in front of the, behind the hall at the, I forget what it is. Yes.
On the Legion side of
on
the road.
On the Legion
though.
side.
Yeah.
There's a 2 stalls start of the angled parking.
Okay. I just had a complaint from residents because of the charger.
Microphone.
Sorry. Because of the charger on private, I guess it would be private property then, by Village Foods. That has nothing to do with us, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Good.
Councillor St. Pierre.
Just wanted to clarify, the 75K, that is the top-up? Is that correct?
Oh, no.
No, okay, so
No.
the 75K is not the top-up, and then there's a grant for 73% of the top-up or of the total cost?
So let me go through this. Through your worship to Councillor St. Pierre. The top-up that we're asking for is about 17,000.
Okay.
The rest of all the costs, including that, come to 75,000.
Okay.
If we were to get the grant, we could either reduce our amount so that we only put 25% of this in order to and get the rest through the grant, or we could expand it. It's our choice. We could, and I would put in for the as much as we can. Again, we'll have this discussion on March 11th when I come forward, and we can see how we want to strategize.
Councillor McMath.
Do you get reports on usage of each of these units and the success of them?
Through your worship to Councillor McMath. That was part of the resolution as far as putting in these, is that we would come back at about the 6-month part with how they do. So yes, all of these would have statistics that we would then generate reports on and see what the usage was.
And when are those coming up?
Once they're installed.
From this one, 6 months
afterwards.
Got
That's
it.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Beddoes, then Bateman.
I've seen these things around all over the place, but I've never used one. Is there a charge for that when you hook up your car, or is it just it's free power for them?
Through your worship to Councillor Beddoes, we have decided, or council had decided not to have a charge initially until we saw the usage statistics from it to see what kind of energy costs it would be.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm perfectly fine for that, but I was just wondering in general, like even the ones downtown, is there a charge, or they put their credit card in and?
No.
Okay.
Some do and some don't.
They can choose. So some people set it up so that the person, when they book it, they pay for it, or some people, like the casino, let you stay for free.
Getting some information.
Yeah, it varies. Councillor Bateman.
Well, Councillor Beddoes and I had a mind meld there because there is, I think, in some municipality. I know that is worrying. Good Lord. We need some. Are we going to rearrange this seating after the first year?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer to that question is yes.
So, yeah, there are some municipalities in Canada where you've got pay meters. I also just wanted to quickly mention that Transition Souk is organizing a electric vehicle symposium at the MCS in, I think, March 22nd or so. So hopefully you'll be notified, I'm sure, Paul. And thanks for all your work on electrifying Souk, or whatever you're doing.
His electrifying work.
Electrifying,
Yes.
not electrocuting.
Thank you, Paul.
One thing that came up on Monday that I thought would be helpful is if there's some way on the district webpage to just have a grants sheet or form or page that would just say, name of the, date, name of the grant, what we've applied for, and then whether or not we were successful. Like, I think the fact that we are applying for these grants and taking up these opportunities is noteworthy, and it just sort of demonstrates that the work we're doing. And just so at the end of the year we can sort of see, like, you know, and then what has happened since then. So if we're unsuccessful, then are we going to continue on with the project and find an alternative source, or have we been successful? And I think it's just, it would be good to know that sort of information. So look forward to that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give you, since we're all here now, just a bit of information on strategic planning. So we are a bit behind than what our original proposal had sort of launched us out to. If we'd stuck with the original timelines, we'd be well into the process by now. But just other things have cropped up. So what is going to happen now is we're going to see a bit of a revision to the timelines, but the way that it's going to roll out is that, as you know, our CAO has gone to staff, just asking all of staff sort of what some of their priorities are and what they, so that they have their input, and that's sort of flowing. They'll be compiling that information. By the end of next week, I hope, our consultant is going to put together a survey for council. We call it a slow survey, and that's so you don't have to log in and answer it and log out, and you have 20 minutes to complete this, because for someone like myself, you know, I'll sit down there and I'll do it, and then I close it, and then later I have all these great ideas, and now I've missed the opportunity to put them in. So it'll probably be like a Word document with some questions that you can sort of take your time. It will have a completion date, and then council will then send that back. If you miss the timeline, there is still going to be other opportunities to come, or if you have a great idea that you didn't include there, there will be more opportunities, but it's just the case because I'd like to get your energy focused into strategic planning. From there, the consultant will meet with some staff, and then we'll then look to meet with all of us for a council and consultant staff session. Through the work that you'll be doing in the survey, it would sort of outline who are our stakeholders, right holders, who do we want to work with on this, and because we have sent off some lists, we might have forgotten some, like in terms of the Lot A charrette and some of the other workshops we've been doing, we've been sending invitations out to group. We may be missing some people along the way, so we want to make sure that we capture all of that. So then there will be a workshop with stakeholders, and then sort of an early draft document will come to us that we can then take to the public in sort of a, here's what we're thinking. What do you think about this? And then see, and then through the slow survey, part of my ask to you is, what does public consultation look like? What do you want from that? Is it a survey? Is it an open house? We are partnering with the Lions on the Sukarama, great opportunity over at Sea Park to gather some more ideas. Do we want to take something out to the schools? What does that all look like? So that'll all come forward, and then we can sort of see, like, is that consultant-led? Is it district-led? Who's doing what in that, and have that defined. The consultant will integrate following the close of the public feedback. We'll close that off into more of a draft. It'll then come to council, committee of the whole session, and then sort of lead towards a final document. And through this process, we'll be defining sort of values and objectives, setting out the framework, action items, what do they look like, and then what is our metrics for measuring all of this. And so that's sort of where we're at, so sort of stay tuned. This is sort of a, now we're like focused into March, so I thought to myself, if I went to council and said, hey, we need to schedule like, 6 more special meetings in the next 2 weeks, not too sure how you would all think of that, given that this process right now is our focus. I also want to sort of respect staff time, because if we schedule all those meetings, we need to have staff here supporting us for that. So just sort of looking at sort of March to sort of start gathering all your great ideas, and then sort of flowing into April. And then from this process also is looking at, okay, how are we going to accomplish this? So who will we be working with? What community groups? What committees? We've seen an example be with Transition Souk in terms of like banning single plastic bags. They've done a lot of work. They come to us. We can take that and modify it. I think that's a great approach. Partnering with Sea Park in terms of an important recreational asset. How do we work together with other groups? And who else is out there? We can't do it all alone. I think there's a real opportunity to rally the community to shake out what's important and sort of define who's doing what, really, and what role are we going to take, and who do we assign it to, who do we follow up with. So that'll be sort of the approach over the next while. So exciting stuff to come. Questions? Councillor Beddoes.
Well, I was just going to make a statement. It's not anything that you said.
No, fine.
I just want to say, this is a little information for you. Before I was elected, I had a number of people come to me and saying, watch staff when they do the budget presentations because they'll try and slip in this, that, and everything. I just want to let you know how professional you've been, and with the idea that we are in very tight budget times and are just giving us sort of the real straight dope. And I personally appreciate it. And I have not seen anybody try and slip in some little sneaky here. So thanks for your efforts from my part. Very well done. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Councillor Bateman.
Well, I just wanted to note that this strategic plan process is quite dramatically different than previous strat plans. Is that correct?
Well, previous strat plan, and I can only recall a few times. One of them was half-day session. I saw it more of a complaint session than anything. Another one, we brought somebody in. Not all of council participated, but it was one day, and that was it. And then, of course, that document did go to a committee of the whole. I can't remember if anything happened in the term before that. Nothing I can put my finger on. And then before that, it was just sort of, I remember I remember when I first got elected coming in, and it was like a one-day event. There was council and staff, and then we had to sort of come up with everything, and then by the end of the day, prioritize, and that was it. And so, I'm a bit of a slow thinker. So then it's the case of after the fact, I'm like, oh, but what about all this stuff? These were all good ideas. Well, I forgot they didn't make it on that day. And then sometimes there's been, the public input is to the committee of the whole. And sometimes, like when the Rotary had a trade show, there was an opportunity to engage with residents there. I just look at it that we can't do everything as a district. We do need to work with others. Sea Park School District, community organizations. How do we harness and work together for results, and who's doing what? So in the case of, if we went to the public now and said, what do you think we should do? There's going to be a wide range of responses. Then how do we prioritize that? I think we all bring together good ideas, and that's sort of where I went with here's what we're thinking. What do you think about this? Because all of us are very different, have diverse life, and we're reaching out all the time, right? And staff are also connecting with the public every day, all the time. So there's other avenues of which to get that. So that's sort of what we're here to think as governors. It's our job to think, but I also think to check in with the public. Here's what we're thinking. What do you think about what we want to do?
I've got a quick follow-up.
Yes.
To that, just, what was it? I saw Al's hand go up, and I suddenly panicked. So updates, and unlike last time, I see in the budget here that we have an annual refresher, right?
Yes.
Where we, over the course of this term.
Because what I don't want to see is us invest all this time and energy into a plan, and then it lives somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then we will always have different requests, and then where does it actually come in? So does it fit, does it not fit, right? So the case of a refresh also is we need to be nimble in local government. So we may see the feds or the province release a grant on X. So we need to adapt and make sure that we're in alignment there if it's relevant to our community and make space for it. So I think it's always the case, I heard this, at election time, I haven't done anything. And it's like, well, actually we did. maybe I just didn't share what we've done, or we haven't said, oh, we've checked off all these things on our strategic plan. We've actually done a lot of things, so it's that communication outwards. But I think it's also making sure that the strategic plan is relevant to what is happening all the time and adapting it as appropriate. Councillors, is that good?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor St. Pierre?
This was just a follow-up on something that happened 4 years ago after the previous election. We had an open space through transition. Yeah, lots of people were there. Actually, many of the councillors were there, and that was wonderful. A good document came out of it, but I'm curious as to whether or not it would be useful for transition to be approached as a group that reaches out to other groups to do something like that again. And if we wanted something like that, or to the Rotary, Lions, any and all stakeholders, do we want to approach, at what point in the process would it be good? Do we want to give them something of what we've got and ask them what they think of it, or do we want prior input from the community in terms of what they think the strategic direction should be? So I'm just curious as to what we might want to do with something like that.
Right now we have them sort of so part of the, I'll call it the slow survey that council will do is list off those stakeholder groups, and there'll be plenty of space for you to write down some good ideas. They would be in sort of on the early, as they would be part of developing the early draft. Should they so choose to. We've reached out to some groups that we never hear back from, but we've reached out. Give that a go. For myself, one thing that I would like to do is to take, is create sort of some ideas board. Here's what we're thinking, and take it to the middle school and have a conversation with, the middle school and the high school, all the schools, and just say, hey, what do you think? Because this generation is going to have to deal with these decisions, these future generations. And they have really good ideas. I got a long list from Brownies, really good ideas. Can't do the reptile tank, maybe. I can do something on Demaumiel Creek. But, yeah, excellent ideas because they live in this community all the time. The parents might commute. Their home is here all the time. So really good ideas there that I think we want to check in with. And I was at the middle school and talking to some young people there, and they said, does anyone care? Does anyone really care about what we think? And I thought, wow, of course we do. And we want to hear that. Really excellent ideas. High school's a little tougher, tough crowd there. But anyway, still good to go. Councillor Beddoes.
I just wanted to say that it's a good time for strategic plan. We just came off an election, and I know everybody else at this table heard exactly what I heard and what some of the priorities were. And I think that's a time for us to put some of those priorities there. This is the Souk's priorities into that action plan. The other thing is about reaching out to the public. I think we better reach out to the public with something as opposed to just gathering things, because you can see what happens when this is a budget we're dealing with.
Yeah. And it's great to see all these people here.
Yeah, and I think that if we give them something to chew on first and then come back, I think we'll be better off.
Yeah, and that's where it's the case of and that's where the discussion was about an early draft. Here it is. And then it forms a talking point. So wherever you go, it's like, here's something. It's like an icebreaker. What do you think about this? Let's talk about this. What's important to you? What would you rank, here? Councillor Parkinson.
I would just like to say there may not be anybody in the audience today. It's 2:00 in the afternoon. Last night we had 40 people in the audience, so maybe evenings are better for most people to come out for different things. So my comment to staff not being here for the earlier presentations, Patty told me that it'll be online for tomorrow to be able to watch it. So that's good. I was just wondering on page 13 if you did a review of those things. That's more my interest. It was for...
Oh, the council budget.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, so to confirm, what do you mean?
Pardon me?
A review of...
Well, did you go through the items that are listed here?
Oh, no. Gotcha, sorry. Yeah, the presentations that happened, I just did a general overview of just a high level of where everything was at, and then kind of said each department will do a presentation. So the council, so we went through GIS and IT, planning, development services. Next meeting is for council and fire.
Okay, so
on
then
Monday's
we'll go
meeting.
Through this.
And then potentially if seeing how we're so early this time, we'll have the other department presentations ready to go as well, and we could carry on with those
Sure.
as well. Corporate services, finance, etc.
Okay, so we'll go over that.
For sure.
Thank you.
I think just time of day always varies. We've had it in the evening and there were 2 people there. We did have someone here earlier, so that was nice. Councillor Logans?
Clearly I missed a lot, I apologize. But I'm wondering if we could, through you to staff, or if it's been answered already, if we could have a budget to actuals for 2018.
Budget to actuals?
Yeah, we can bring that to Monday's meeting for sure.
Okay. So Monday is council and fire and, yeah, because we still have a number of meetings to go.
Yeah, there's 2 more meetings next week for Monday, Tuesday scheduled right now. So Mondays was tentatively booked for fire and council, and then the Tuesday meeting would be corporate service, the fluffier ones, corporate services, finance, CAO, the operations departments. We kind of did the more detailed, complicated ones in the first couple meetings was the plan. Yeah.
Okay.
And we will be ready to go with corporate services for Monday as well. So the fluffy stuff we'll make sure is ready for you, just in case we go early.
Okay, so just seeing how the timing goes. Right, okay, so Monday and Tuesday both starting at 6. Those are both special council meetings. We don't have regular meetings on that day. Yeah, good. Okay, go ahead.
So just through your worship, I just wanted to, because we have extra time, and this is kind of the first time you guys are seeing these numbers, because we have a few days now before Monday, I just want to know, is there any priorities or any other things you want us to look into before Monday so we can kind of come prepared for these questions that you may or may not have now that you've kind of seen and you kind of understand. I appreciate the folks that couldn't be here right at the start, but the messaging was, this is a bare bones budget. There's not much extras added to it. It's to kind of, because of the Parks and Trails, all the planning that is going to be occurring this year is going to potentially set the stage for 2020 and beyond. So this is just kind of a placeholder budget right now for the asks that we put forward, or asks that we need. Regardless of these plans, we know that these are needs for the district. So, yeah, I just thought if there's anything that you guys would like us to prepare to bring back for Monday, then that will kind of be better use of everyone's time for Monday.
Okay. Just a question. Do you know what the tax increase is going to list at? 13 point. I don't have my glasses. Is it 13.25%?
Pardon?
No.
That's
what I'm like.
The property tax increase. It's on page 2. 7.3 is the amount proposed in the current budget that is put forward here. So that's approximately $87 per resident.
$87 per resident.
Per resident, based on last year's tax rates that were set.
On average assessed.
On average assessed values, yes.
$87. $87. Okay, Councillor Logans, then Parkinson.
Thank you. I am just wondering, and I don't know for sure, but I think that we passed a motion, perhaps it was even at the last budget meeting, it could have been so long ago, to continue the $50,000 a year for the Souk Youth Facility Reserve. But I didn't see that in here, so I guess first check and see if that's the case, because my memory, I don't know if it serves me well on that one, but I think that we did.
Sorry, which reserve fund is that?
The Seniors Youth Facility
Seniors
Reserve.
Youth. Okay, we can double check that for sure.
Councillor Parkinson?
I was just wondering if we can just email you the questions we have then before Monday, because I haven't gone through it all just yet, and there might
for whatever works. Yeah, I just want to
I was just wondering if
come prepared
like
for answers, because I'm not sure what kind of questions you guys may have, and I could go off in a million different rabbit holes. So.
Yep. Other questions from members of council? Councillor Logans McMath and St. Pierre.
We could get married. I just wanted to go back to parks and the 2 washroom facilities and the water fountains. Roughly, I know this is going to be kind of a tough question, but how far out? Just I know that we're looking at a plan to review the spit, and there's a massive undertaking, a massive project. is it worthwhile to put those features in now if we're going to?
I'll speak to a little bit.
Okay.
So the washroom that we're putting in the Whiffen Spit for this year's budget would go right up at the top of the parking stall area and has been identified in 2018 as a high priority target and desire for that area.
So it would be unaffected by any construction?
It's technically in Quimper Park. So we have this
Oh,
interesting
right.
thing where Quimper
Yeah.
Park leads to Whiffenspit Park. So the location is actually in Quimper Park, and we currently have a porta potty there, which is not ideal. It's really well used. So, yeah, there's a future need to upgrade the vault toilet that is halfway down the spit. It's not accessible, and it was probably installed 20, 25 years ago. So I think we could look at that as a part of the future planning process. But this one near the parking lot is definitely a priority. Yeah.
So can you go back to that slide, Jennifer, please? So the 105, that's just for one washroom, or I'm looking more for like a breakdown.
Sure. So the single stall washroom for Whiffen Spit is about $40,000.
Okay.
The fountains are about $10,000 once we get them delivered. And the water line installation at both sites, a little bit unknown, but we're guessing around $45,000. For the Whiffen Spit area, there's an archaeological study or permit that has been completed. What they'll have to do is they'll have to monitor any construction or any digging on that area if it's outside the road area. We can dig within the disturbed road area and put a water line down there. It'd be a little more costly. So determining where that is exactly and where the fountain goes exactly will determine the costs once we get to those kind of RFQ and tenders portion of the project. But that's it. The water line, and then the water line includes a hose bib that goes on to the end that will help with vandalism and washing and maintenance of both facilities as well.
Thank you.
Councillor St. Pierre?
I was just hoping, given what Laura Hooper had said about the carpenter, she had some sort of an idea in terms of, I don't know if it was on-call or part-time, but where the cost would be kept down. But I would be interested in knowing what that cost might be.
It's on call.
On-call? No, for a carpenter.
Yeah, I don't think we actually determined what that cost may be.
Well, it'd be nice to have a ballpark for.
But yeah, well, certainly when Laura comes back, we'll get an educated guess to you.
$50 an hour.
Other comments or questions from members of council? Well, thank you very much, staff, for putting this, Rachel or Ms. Gray and your team who have, worked so hard just to put this all together for us. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on your first budget with us. And I know we haven't adopted it yet, but we're going there. So thank you, and to all of the staff who've taken the time to do this. And there's likely will be more questions that will come up, and we'll look forward to carrying on Monday. So I think that is it then. Do I call for a motion to adjourn?
That appears to be it, Your Worship, unless there are further questions.
Okay, motion to adjourn by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor McMath. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously.